Hello, masters of the universe. It's time to get beefy, it's time to get hunky, and it's time to gather around for the greatest show that ever was conceived and put to internet. It's time for, hey, did you see this one? Oh, hello. It's that time again, everybody. We're here, and we're on Twitch, and we're talking movies, and it's me, Jason, and my co-host, Steve, and we
Hi.
Special guest, a threefer, a third time's a charm. Back on the show, it's Tim Covey. Welcome to Hey, did you see this one? This week.
Welcome back.
This week, we're starting Beefy Hunk Action Month. This was conceived because we wanted to talk about some brawny boys.
Yeah, we also just wanted a change of pace from a month of musicals.
Yeah.
And before that, I don't even remember what we did. It's too long ago now in my mind.
But also, it was a new movie month. But also,
Right.
Typically in the summer we do like a summer movies month, some sort of blockbuster adjacent thing. This is sort of in lieu of that. This sort of scratches that itch, and we're starting off with the Dolph Lundgren classic, Masters of the Universe. Will it hold up? Will it hold up to all of our memories of this film, or are we going to pan it so bad?
Hold up. Yeah, I can't even tell you if these were all this month's movies were all summer movies because they all came out before I was born.
Wait,
like they're
this
one's
came
definitely
out in, like 1993.
I was born in 1994. No, I'm joking. I don't know. I don't remember when any of them came out. I was too young to see any of them.
Yeah,
This movie came out before I was born.
This came out in 87. You were born in what, 88?
87. So, but it came out. Oh wait, no, I was alive, just barely though.
You're just barely alive.
Yeah.
You didn't see it in utero.
No.
Funny enough, I went to a Fleetwood Mac concert in utero, so that's why I'm like the way that I am.
Named after a slasher, conceived at a.
I wasn't conceived
in a cloud
there.
of marijuana smoke.
I was conceived in a van in a cloud of marijuana smoke.
Ugh.
I merely was just at a Stevie Nicks concert, Fleetwood Mac concert. Anyway, we're immediately off track. Let's so I guess we'll go right into our history. How does that sound?
A history of violence.
A brief history.
We have sound effects now.
Sound effects now.
It's what this particular movie deserves. This deeply cerebral, intellectual diatribe of a film. Yeah.
He said what?
Also, Tim, sorry. Please welcome back to the show, Tim Covey, everybody.
Yes. Third time.
Thank you for having me. You brought me back for the best one.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
This is definitely the best movie you've been on for.
Right.
It's not like the other movies that you were on for were nominated for awards and created an entire genre of film.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is that upper echelon that we've been all foaming at the mouth for.
What was the other movie? There
Mark
was
Twain.
Mark Twain, but I thought you were on. This is your third time.
Yeah. So
Castaway?
Mark Twain, Castaway, and now this one.
Right, Castaway. Yeah, Castaway rules. This movie is not Castaway.
It's really not.
Are you telling me that Masters of the Universe is not better than Castaway?
Look, I spent all the time
Sorry,
to
Tom Hanks?
make this poster here, make this cool background, and this was too much time spent. This
More than it deserves.
Way
Yeah.
more than it deserved. So, with that, this is our history with the movie. Tim, I believe you should go first because I think of the three of us, you may have been the appropriate age for this movie when it came out.
Actually, like it's very poignant because I was a He-Man fan as a young boy, and
You were a he-boy?
this movie, I was a He-boy, and that and She-Ra, and this movie started me on the path away from He-Man, thinking like, maybe this isn't so cool, and threw me into the waiting arms of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and especially the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which is a wonderful movie. But this movie, I remember like the family going to our local video store before there ever was a Blockbuster in Canada, and I think this was probably a jumbo video rent, and getting excited to see that, like, oh, there's Masters of the Universe. This must have been 88 or even 89. And I was like, oh, cool, He-Man. And then my brother looking down at me like, this isn't the movie you want to see. And I was like, no, it's He-Man. It's going to be great. And then watching it, and it was so very strange for like a 5-year-old child to be watching this, and like, they're in a high school, and what's going on, and so yeah, my experience with this movie, where it was changing in a positive way with the other movies we reviewed with me on here, this one had a negative impact where it pushed me away from a genre ultimately. So that's more or less my history with it.
Yeah, I think it was like a little bit like too little, too late, as they say, where they were trying to ride off the success of the toy line, because it was a toy line before. It was like in tandem with the TV show toy line. In the 80s, people would just make toys and then make a TV show that was essentially just a half-an-hour-long commercial for the toys.
But
this was an example
like
of that.
The waning time for people's interest in He-Man toys.
Yeah,
that they're slowly being pushed off the market. So I think there was an air of desperation to this as well.
They're like, quick, get Canon to make a shit movie, because Canon never makes shit movies, right? I was doing a light amount of research before this to be like, was this one of the last films that Canon made? And then I looked, and it's like, no, they made like 400 more movies after this over the course of 6 years. They made a lot.
Yeah, but it feels like it was. It feels there is desperation to this that does feel like it's a swan song and like one last hurrah before we die.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely one of their last big budget Hollywood movies. Like they would make a lot of stuff overseas and TV, like TV movies, straight to DVD, HBO special, stuff like that. But I think one of the last things they made was like some sort of robot, like a Rock'em Sock'em robot type movie where it's like giant robots or something weird like that.
Yeah, and that was after, whether it was Golem or Golbus left Canon. I forget which one of the two it was that left, and then they made competitive dance movies against each other.
Yeah, that's how it goes. They started the competing studios making 2 asteroid films, 2 volcano films. That trend was started by Canon and anti-Canon.
That's interesting too. I'm looking at the toys for this era, and they made like a Gwildor, and that's pretty much it.
Oh, poor Billy Barty.
Yeah.
Oh God, I feel sorry for him this entire movie. That part where he's like pouring barbecue sauce down his hole in his face. I'm like, this little person is just pouring barbecue sauce into a hole in a mask into his face. He's probably like drowning on it.
Or when he was like upside down in the water, and like, oh God, he's in the mask. He's in the mask. Get him out of there.
He's drowning for real. He's drowning for real, guys.
Oh, sorry. There's a Sorod and there's one other one. Blade. Yeah, that's hilarious. I've never seen the figures for this. I've never seen, that's
Blade was not a figure before the movie, I believe. I think that
only Beastman was before the movie.
Only Beastman. Yeah. Well, there's some other character. We'll get into it when we get into the body of the show, but I have all the characters here. But Steve, if you're done, Tim, why don't you go ahead and give us your history with the amazing live-action He-Man movie called Name of Masters of the Universe?
Yeah, I could do that. Starring Frank Langella?
Yeah.
Skeletor?
No, but he's like Skeletor instead of Skeletor! Also,
fun fact, Frank Langella, I believe, considers this one of his most favorite roles he's ever played in his entire career, which is wild. That he's like, I would 100% come back and do it again.
To be fair, he was the only one really putting in time. Like the rest of them,
but he was also hamming it up.
He was also
hamming
it up. Appropriately.
He was doing his like, I am a mustache twirling villain. I am going to truly be a master of the universe. Anyway,
he was like Ming the Merciless essentially in this.
Yeah. So my history, you know, He-Man was a product of the '80s, as was I. I'm a little too young to have been hit by the He-Man craze. I did have some of the figures, I think, because they were doing so poorly in sales. When I started to get toys purchased for me by either my parents or, you know, their friends or my family, they, you know, people would just go into Toys R Us or whatever and be like, oh, look at this bargain bin of He-Man
Look at
toys,
this
they're all
stack of
50
Gwildors.
cents. And I remember everyone had this one like that looked like a manta ray man or whatever. I can't remember what his
Yeah.
name was, but everyone had that one. um but I do also have this weird memory of when I was a kid going to the beach with I think my sister wasn't even born yet because I don't remember her being there. So I think it was just me and my mom, and I found a bunch of He-Man toys just on the beach buried. There was like a little plastic shovel, and I started digging, and there was just a bunch of He-Man toys buried in the sand. I was like, what the fuck? And I think we left them. I don't remember taking them home, but I wanted to. But I think my mom was like, yeah, what if the people come back who own them? You wouldn't be very happy if you came back. And I was like, true. So I buried them again.
The curse is passed on.
Yeah, that's my history with He-Man, burying action figures on the beach when I was 3 years old. But I have seen this movie before, and I've been aware of its existence forever. But I remember the first time I watched it, I was staying over at my partner's house for like a week, and I had brought my computer, and he had like all of his friends had brought all their computers, and we had just like set up all our computers in the basement, and we'd all play like a LAN, basically, like everybody would play Dota or whatever. And I was sucked at Dota, so I was like, I don't want to play Dota. So while these guys would play Dota, I would just watch the 10-minute segments of He-Man on YouTube. And I watched, that was the first time I saw it. That was the first time I saw it, and I was like, this sucks. This movie's so bad, but I watched the whole thing. And then we watched it again during the pandemic because we were doing this bad movie club where me and a group of my friends would get together, and over Zoom we would watch just trash movies. And this is one of the ones that sticks out as one of the worst of the worst. Yeah, not a huge history with He-Man. I like the new He-Man TV show. I thought it was awesome.
The Kevin Smith one.
Yes. It was pretty well told in terms of a story, unlike this movie.
No.
So Jason, why don't you tell us about your history?
Yeah, we're gonna tear this one off its nostalgia.
I'm sure there are people that love this movie, and that's fine, because there's plenty of crappy movies from the 80s that I watched a billion times as a kid, so I have an affinity for them and I love them, but I know they're bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll say that, like, a friend of the show, Aaron Hurdle, who came on and talked about Krull with us, he still, like, he holds all these movies in such high regard. He loves these shitty fantasy movies, but they do range in, like, quality from Krull, which is, like, you know, pretty good, and like a Labyrinth, which is like a great movie, to all the way down to Masters of the Universe.
But it's like, you know, we talked about Dark Crystal, and there's people who just like their life is Dark Crystal. But I didn't watch it as a kid, so when I watched it as an adult, I was like, the Muppets are cool. I don't know, this movie's boring though.
And that's kind of the problem with 80s fantasy. I think that's why in this they end up in the real world. Anyway, we'll get to that.
They end up in the real world because of the budget,
and also because of the budget, because
the real world is more interesting than a fantasy world.
I mean, I think that we'll talk about it. I think that saves the movie for me a little bit. What I will say about my history, though, is I was aware of okay, so I'm kind of in the middle of you guys. I'm a little bit younger than Tim, a little bit older than Steve. But also based on my location where I grew up, we didn't He-Man never, and Transformers never showed on TV.
His name is Jonathan He-Man. Adam He-Man.
During Saturday morning cartoons. So I missed the boat on both of those, because they would have still been on and on syndication when I was 5, right? Like, I was born in 85. I was aware of this movie, but the thing is because I was a couple years younger than the people who had gone to see it in theaters, I didn't have that thing that you had, Tim, where you were like, I want to watch this movie, and then you had an older brother to be like, I don't know, but you still watched it. All the older brothers were like, do not watch that. And then I got it through the scope of, like, it would be on TV, and I'd be like, Dolph Lundgren looks ridiculous in this movie, so I wouldn't watch it. But I do remember one time when I was probably like 18 or 19, I sat down and like watched it with a group of friends at like in like my first apartment, and I remember being so confused about all of the decisions they made. And I don't know everything about He-Man, but I know enough to know that like He-Man's the main fucking character, and they definitely don't go to the.
I mean, I know enough to know that his name is not He-Man. His name's Adam, and they just call him He-Man the whole fucking time.
They don't even. They definitely don't call him Adam in this, right?
Yeah,
No.
or Prince or anything
Prince
like
Adam.
that.
I do have a theory corner for this, but about that. But basically, my whole history is I kind of put it into the dark recesses of my mind. Only remembered that opening shot where they first get to Earth and see the cow. That's the only thing I can remember about it.
Because your brain was trying to kill itself so that you didn't have to watch the rest.
When Duncan is like
do not form memories, please.
I didn't remember Gwildor.
Valuable storage space.
I didn't remember that. I know who Orko is, and I didn't remember that they just replaced him with this like monster. Which was
they could have just called him Orko. I don't understand. It's not Orko though.
Why did they invent? It's like in Turtles 2, when they just invent Token Razor when they already have Bebop and Rocksteady. It's like what? What?
I was thinking about that during the rewatch. Actually, I actually thought that exactly. It was like has that feel of Turtles 2 or Mario Brothers, where and yeah, like to get into it later, but there's this feeling of ulterior motives in where they want to guide this, and it's like comes off so choppy and odd and alienating and weird.
I'll tell you what, Tim, we'll get right to it, but first.
Ho, 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 ho! Everybody back up, because here comes the body of the episode.
And just before just before we even get to that, I do have one last thing that I want to present to you guys before we get into
the MPAA, everyone. The MPAA.
You should play that after you say the MPAA.
Oh yeah, that's a good point actually. Anyway, the MPAA rating for this movie is 28/6/27. But yes, wow. To what you're saying, Tim, it's like before like the late 90s, early 2000s when they started making superhero movies and they were like, we're going to actually put characters in movies that exist, like even the weird ones. They used to like represent ideas in adaptations like this. And Gwildor absolutely is an adaptation or an idea of their like weird alien dwarf sidekick with pointy ears. But maybe the studio was like, we don't want to put like a like how do we make that character exist? They could have easily just put the Orko costume on that actor, right?
Or even just like a hood and cloak on Billy Barty.
Give him a hood and cloak with an O on his stomach and call him Orko.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they tried and it looked too much like a Jawa, and George Lucas was like, if you do that, I will sue you.
I will fuck you up.
Yeah, because he would have glowing yellow eyes or whatever, right? Yeah, it could be. Maybe they just were like, all right, let's just axe Orko, and we'll make a new annoying character. I mean, Orko's pretty annoying too.
So supposedly with this director, of the many weird things about him, one thing is he was trying to make his little version of Jack Kirby-inspired fantasy storytelling involving space gods. And so I think because like the writer was the same guy who wrote for The Dark Crystal and actually wrote for the Muppets as well, so that's a funny connection there. So when the script landed in the director's lap, I think he started making these little changes because he wanted to do his own Jack Kirby era of Thor and Jack Kirby new gods from DC type stuff. Yeah. And I think that's where the interpretations of He-Man started to happen, where these things started changing and morphing into these odd little creatures. And
it's fun.
And in execution, like
toys and everything are really fun. Like, it's just like the craziest concept. No, nothing was off the table. They're like, I don't know. It's a guy who's made of moss. What's his name? Moss Man. Oh, okay.
And the action figure will have it'll be like tactile.
Yeah. What's this guy's name? Stinkor. He smells bad.
Drill
Yeah, and
Zone.
all the battle wound characters that have the flip around
I loved
chest
that
pieces
shit.
and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at
Manny Faces.
Manny
His
Faces.
faces switch or whatever. Wasn't that a guy?
I'm looking. It was.
With the rotating head, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm looking at David Odell's stuff here. The guy who wrote this movie and wrote the other things you mentioned, The Dark Crystal. He wrote like every episode of The Muppet Show. He wrote the Supergirl movie. And then
Zoinks.
And then
Yikes.
after this,
And that was the thing he did before this.
Yeah.
So it's just like a real sharp turn
it
off a
seems
cliff.
like this movie may have hamstringed him a little bit because after this he did like a couple of TV show episodes, a couple of made for straight to DVD Muppets movies, and then literally the Dark Crystal TV show.
I think that's his last or most recent entry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Dark Crystal is also based on like a bunch of stuff that Jim Henson had come up with conceptually, right? So it's
and Brian Friod, or how do you pronounce his last name? That artist.
yeah.
So yeah, like it's this huge clash of ideas, and I was thinking of as I was watching it yesterday, and then doing some research, and once I hit that, and then realized that like, oh, this is also the same guy that did Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future, and the idea of like circuitry armor, I was like, oh, okay, so that's why this guy wanted to do Jack Kirby stuff. He ended up doing it in the end again with Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future and all this stuff. And so some of the things in this movie started making a little bit more sense as I was trying to imagine concepts that people were working with. But like at the same time, I was also asking myself, am I just trying to find any reason whatsoever to explain this awful movie that I'm watching? Because there's I mean, most certainly there was a budgetary problem, because I don't know if it's 100% true, but apparently Mattel was holding out on their half of the budget, because that was, I think the arrangement was Canon was to do one half of the fiscal budget and Mattel the other, and Canon does all the production. But Mattel withheld because they were concerned about what they were going to be writing for the movie. And one of their big things was they didn't want He-Man to be killing people or being too brutal. They wanted him to be very moral and very thoughtful, and like being like a leader for all these people. And I guess they're trying to more or less keep things aligned with their properties with the cartoon show.
From what I remember, he didn't really kill people. He just slapped them with his sword.
Yeah. Like, with like the flat end, he would tap him over the head.
Instead, let's give him a laser blaster, and now he's a laser man.
Give him a gun.
I counted the amount of times that he uses the sword, and it's 3 times. And I thought maybe because he like takes the sword out of the thing at the end and yells, "I have ultimate power," or whatever his catchphrase is.
Yeah.
Maybe
I have the power.
I have ultimate power. I have the power.
Unlimited power.
Prince Adam's classic phrase, "I am an ultimate man with ultimate power." When he pulls the sword out, I was like, oh, maybe they wanted to use it sparingly. But like, there's a scene in that last bit where the director clearly just said, all right, Dolph, just kind of wrestle the guys attacking you. Just kind of like pick them up. And there's another scene.
Huck them into one of these many holes in the set.
Yeah, then
there's tons. Pick a hole, toss them in.
They all gather, like, get on top of him, and one guy trips and falls, like fully trips and falls.
That full fight scene, you can just see feet missing faces and fists clearly like going over top of heads, and you're just like, all right.
Yeah,
and then he does
no choreography.
And then he does that trope where he like busts out and makes them all go flying, which is fun if you're watching professional wrestling and it's Kane or The Undertaker or Brock Lesnar. But in a movie that's supposed to have some form of fight choreography,
where they can do multiple takes.
I think, Steve, fundamentally this movie, they wasted all the budget on the best part of the movie. In my opinion, the best part of the movie is like all the little gadgets and gizmos and like the little practical, like when they go into Gwildor's like cave.
Mm-hmm.
That was cool.
That's actually super cool set. Yeah, for sure. It's like thought and detail put into all the background stuff. And I remember thinking when I was watching, I'm like, how do we go to here from eating chicken? Like it's
it's like the setup is quite good actually. up until the point that they come to the real world, and then it just grinds down to like now
so
we're gonna follow these annoying teenagers around while they don't break up, even though they say they're gonna break up, and then they eat chicken for a while, and like there's a lot of chicken eating in this movie. It's so strange.
After he's like, it's our last date ever, and she was like, yeah, and then they kiss goodbye. I'm like,
let's not go to a restaurant or anything. Yeah,
that's
not. I brought us a. He says that it's a bucket of ribs, and then later it's clearly chicken.
It's chicken ribs, okay?
Chicken fried ribs.
Yeah,
it's delicious, actually.
But they made weird, surprising use of that chicken to talk about how unusual it is for people to eat living organisms, or what was once a living organism.
I mean, listen, I don't eat a lot of meat.
Weird.
And there are times where I do, but I am primarily a vegetarian. But there are times when I'm like, okay, like I'll go to my parents' house and they make dinner, and I'm not going to make a stink about not eating, so I'll just eat what they make. But there are times when I'm eating meat and I immediately am like, oh God, I'm eating like the flesh of a living creature. And I think about what I'm biting into, right? Like I'm thinking about it being muscle breaking apart and like tearing, and I'm like, oh, well, and I get kind of sick about it. But then I'm like, but it tastes good, so I'll just swallow it and forget.
You just pour that gravy down your mask.
Yeah, just forget about it.
Yeah. Before we move on, let me just do a quick synopsis of the plot, because it's pretty basic. It's essentially, it's like if the previous episode ended with Skeletor taking over Castle Grayskull, and he's got the sorceress of Castle Grayskull trapped, and He-Man like tries to infiltrate and can't do it, and then basically,
which I think is smart, because so many of the episodes of the show were like, this is how the middle of the show would end up. And, this would be sort of the final act of an episode of a cartoon show. So you're catering to the people who like the show, but you're also, it's not so confusing that somebody who has no idea what He-Man is will come in and be like, what the fuck is going on? Like Skeletor's like, I am now going to take over the world. And you're like, okay, got it. This guy who has a skull for a face is the bad guy. Got it.
Yeah.
But he is,
and his henchman is named Evil Lynn.
Yeah.
Okay. Got it. She's evil, I guess.
Sorry, what were we going to say, Tim?
I was going to say that at the very least, the characters are mostly at the beginning informing us of who they are by their actions, what you want in an action movie. You don't want them to explain too much to the camera with words in an action movie. So like I'm trying to give credit where credit's due, that like it does, as you were saying, like, it does kind of start in a proper forward direction in that sense.
Yeah, I do think that. So anyway, Skeletor does some shit, and then they open a portal, and then they go to Earth.
They open a portal. Gwildor and crew go through. There's a second key, I guess,
using like a broken saxophone or whatever. It looks like 4 saxophones got crushed into one saxophone.
Yep, and it plays like a synthesizer, because in 1987, synth was all the rage.
Yeah.
So they end up on Earth, where basically, Skeletor uses all of his resources to come through, and they just kind of chase them around this town that nobody else lives in, I guess. Did you get that feeling? Like
it was like an abandoned town.
Yeah, everybody's on vacation. Yeah.
There's 2 waitresses, 1 chicken customer, and a guy on a synth band.
Yeah, it's a very 80s trope to like do that. Like I feel like there were moments in Back to the Future where the world doesn't feel alive, and Gremlins kind of does that.
They can't afford to have a bunch of, like, if this movie had a budget, it would be daytime and there'd be people everywhere screaming for their lives, and not the middle of the fucking night.
It's perpetual night in this world. Yes.
And then basically we got a final battle, and fucking He-Man saves the day, even though for a He-Man movie, He-Man is like third banana. I would say, like,
like he's like in Batman and Batman Returns, where like he may as well not be here. It would still be the same movie, more or less.
Yeah, it's like the main character of this movie.
Listen, Skeletor's got to whip somebody at the end with a laser.
A lot. He's got to whip him a lot.
Yeah.
Actually, the couple, the father and daughter feel like kind of like the people you want to follow, and then when the humans like come into it, it sort of goes from the Duncan and Liliana. What's her name?
Courteney Cox's character? I don't know what her name was.
No, her name's
Yeah.
Julie. Tila.
Tila,
Who's
right?
a character from the show. The same with
Yes.
Yeah.
But it
I
feels
must tell
like
you, Tila was so mean to little Grindelfuck or whatever his name was.
As a short side note, Steve, you
Yeah.
never remember characters from the movies, but I always do, and I fucking barely remember.
I remember characters if they're memorable.
if
they're
memorable,
interesting.
if you
Yeah.
care. But this one,
Yeah.
I was.
I
Like,
have the IMDb open in front of me right now. I could look, but I refuse to. I'm not looking.
I wrote Gwildor. I wrote Goldor. I wrote Geldor.
I definitely wrote his name 5 or 6 different times, and they're never the same.
Right.
In my notes.
I never wrote Gwildor. Not once.
One of them I wrote Grim Grim.
But that's the thing about there's fantasy names that like you'll remember like when you hear Aragorn you have the image in your head right away. There's no mistaking him for anyone else. But then when you get the image of a cigar chewing producer just going, I don't know, Gwildor, whatever.
I don't know what
called
the
Gwildy.
fucking kids. Old Gwilbert.
Yeah. We'll make a million toys. Don't worry about it.
But like
And-
Orko is a name that you can remember easily, and it sticks in your head because it sounds like a familiar sounding thing, right?
More
And,
distinct looking character too.
Or like,
Yeah.
to bring up Lord of the Rings again,
Yeah.
like Legolas, the reason that you know Legolas's name is because in all 3 movies at some point somebody yells his name before he does something dope. You're like, wow, he just
yeah.
Legolas.
And that's actually a very good point whenever it comes to like fantasy films. And this is not something that requires a huge budget. It just requires people being a little thoughtful while they're making it.
Yeah.
That like you can do this call to action with their titles and makes them more memorable. That's actually an extremely good point. Which
It's also
It's
something
like-
I've noticed. Like I run D&D every week, right? And so I'm constantly throwing in weird characters.
yeah,
And I've noticed that, it's really easy to make a character's name memorable, but it's also very easy to make a character whose name nobody will ever remember, no matter how many times you're told it. They're like, what's his name again?
Yeah.
Red Gregory? But I'm like, no. But that's maybe a better name. Red Gregory would maybe be a better name and more memorable.
that's like a very Adventure Time name right there.
Red Gregory.
Yeah. But
anyway.
yeah,
Besides the
it's-
point, but like it's easy and it's hard to make something that sticks in someone's mind at the same time. So like this movie, I think
Yeah.
fails, and I think that's probably why they just were like, just call him He-Man. Like people will remember He-Man, and we don't need to throw Adam in there, and we're not going to do transformation.
Yeah, okay.
so.
Because it's He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, but they only refer to him as He-Man like
When he
on-
transforms into He-Man, which
Okay.
he uses the sword. When he says "I have the power," there's a transformation that takes place, and
Yeah.
he wears like a pink blouse and
Yeah.
purple
Oh.
leotard or whatever.
Actually, thank you for mentioning that because it's now time to go into.
No! It's him! Run! He's got his theories! They're all so...
Okay, it's way too long. It's comically long. I've only played the full thing once, but it just goes on and on with me doing different laughs. Anyway,
Yeah.
they represented the theory is basic. It's a dumb theory. Steve, you might actually agree with this. They represented the pink in Prince Adam's shirt with the pink convertible.
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
That's what because I was like, He-Man is wearing his fucking weird Saxon the band from the 80s fucking
Yeah.
A thing that if you've ever watched
Outfit.
gay porn,
Yeah.
you see all the time.
It's a very Zardoz looking uniform for sure.
Oh my
Yeah.
god, I watched Zardos on the weekend for the first time. I've never seen it. It is so fucked up. I don't
need to
know.
watch
It's-
Zardoz.
That's a whole different animal. That's a whole
Yeah.
that's a horse of a different
It's like
color.
borderline like experimental art film where you're like, what am I watching right now?
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a story for another day.
But
Zardoz.
we're definitely going to cover that because Sean Connery in a fucking
I don't know if I can ever
watch.
watch that again. I had to wash
I'm
my
only
brain.
a phone call away for that one, please.
Okay.
We'll have you
Um,
back on. We'll have you back on for that one for sure. But he doesn't.
I mean, I don't hate that theory, but I feel like pink convertible is sort of like something that's of the era, right?
of
Like,
the era, yeah.
Yeah, like there was also like in the 80s as well, famously doing 50s throwback, and like, I mean, I think that was more like a 67 Cadillac convertible anyway.
Yeah.
But still like that kind of retro stuff that they were cherishing at that time. But it wouldn't surprise me if they were like wanting to throw in some familiar colors, and that happened to be one of the options or choices. So yeah. I'm not going to dismiss it because there's with how wild and hairy this movie gets, there's no reason to assume not.
There's one guy on the art department who is just like, I'm sneaking a pink car in because they're not letting He-Man wear his classic pink uniform.
His classic pink coat. His button-up shirt with the white beater underneath.
Yeah, I'm like having trouble picturing it in my head, but I know it's vibrant, that's for sure. I mean, the whole show is, right? Like everything is like super colorful.
That's another thing I wanted to bring up. The color palette of this fucking whole movie is like gray and dark blue.
That's what that's just like city, any live action interpretation forever. Up until like very recently, even like the Marvel costumes have been super muted and like great, and I guess you can kind of blame the Nolan and Snyder stuff for that, because they're like, we need to make it feel more realistic and more like it's in the real world.
That's true.
Michael Bay as well.
Chris Nolan kind of fucked, like he
I don't think he fucked it. He just made three movies that everybody liked.
What people like, he made the thing where all superhero movies have to be gritty for like a while, and even the first couple of MCU Marvel movies before Kevin Feige came on were like, they had that grit to them. Like, have you watched Incredible Hulk recently? It's just like, stop.
The Ang Lee one?
No,
the Edward Norton one.
Edward Norton one. It's like, please stop being so gritty.
I don't think I've seen that movie since the theater, and I'm like, I don't need to ever watch that again.
But what we've only recently come out of that.
The Ang Lee one though, it rocks. I like it a lot.
Was a weird, great movie.
So weird.
But the thing about DC is like all the DC stuff is all over the place, color palette wise, especially now. Like the Batman is like, let's take Christopher Nolan's Batman and make it even darker and grittier.
I think it's just like, that was, Christopher Nolan has a particular style in terms of his film. He's an auteur. You can look at all of his body of work and you can immediately be like, oh, this is Christopher Nolan. He just happened to make 3 Batman movies, and he just happened to make 3 of the best superhero movies ever made, in a lot of people's opinions.
2 of the best
opinion on that is, I mean, I'm not going to sit here and talk about the fucking Dark Knight trilogy. I don't give a shit. Those movies have been discussed to death.
That's true, but The Dark Knight Rises is bad and not good, in my opinion.
Okay.
When it comes to this movie, though, I thought that it was like,
I think The Dark Knight Rises is better than like 80% of Marvel movies, to be honest with you.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. I'll give it a hard maybe.
Okay.
But I would
better than
say
Eternals. Sorry, Tim.
But it's most certainly, you're right though about the colors, that like, yes, you're correct, Steve, that like there's so many 80s movies that did not do, whether by style choice or otherwise, did not really do too much colorful stuff. But
I mean, just to use a very current example, we've had Hugh Jackman play Wolverine for like almost 30 years,
literally 8 times,
and this guy has never worn his yellow Wolverine costume until the filming of the new Deadpool movie. And it's like, the only reason they're getting away with it is because it's going to be a hard R comedy, right? So they're like, no, put him in the yellow, and then I saw a picture of him and I was like, he looks sick.
Yeah, he looks
it looks really good. I kind of wish it was the orange and tan. That's my personal favorite, but whatever.
Right.
But there's still opportunity to make it colorful, especially when you're talking about these, like to have these named characters in your movie, and like you look at Man-at-Arms from the show, and like there's a specific color palette of him, of orange and green, or Teela, even just in the look of Teela, where she does look like a season 1 Star Trek TNG character, background character, and in this movie it's very drab. And then there's Dolph Lundgren, giant, naked, and oiled. And it's just not all that
wearing a cape for some reason. He doesn't wear a cape in the show. Maybe it's like they didn't have a cape on him. They're like, this is too sexy. People are gonna be too turned on. Put a cape on him or something.
Well, yeah, for him to like put his arms around Courtney Love in an alley, you probably want a cape or something. Can't just be nearly nude; has to be mostly nude. But yeah, like there still is opportunity to do something with the color palette and not mute it out with your color timing, and I think that's another thing too that I mean we were texting back and forth before. You were mentioning that you're giving a second watch to this, Steve, because you were falling asleep the first time, and I remember
I fell asleep.
Okay, straight up fell asleep. I didn't want to throw you entirely under the bus for that one, but I was nodding off too, and like a big part of it is that it's visually not stimulating.
Boring, yeah.
And it's a missed opportunity. There's such a thing as colors back in 1987. So,
but the pacing also is like all over the place as well, where it's like go 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 go, stop,
boring.
Everyone stop moving, stop moving. Okay, go 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 go.
It's also not a movie that I don't think was ever like updated visually. Like there's no like Blu-ray of it, so it doesn't. You can't get like a cool 4K cut that has like that pops. I watched it. I didn't mention this in my.
Only successful movies get those.
It's true. I didn't. Sometimes like cult classics that weren't successful get them too. But this is neither of those things. It seems like this actually might have killed He-Man as a franchise. But I watched it on like a shitty YouTube, and it was like hard to follow because it just like looks bad on YouTube. And then I watched the rest on Tubi, and not only is it like a slow movie at times, and also kind of hard to follow and kind of hard to like care about, but when you throw ads in every like 10 minutes as well, that just takes you out of it too, right? So.
Yeah.
Strange product placement as well. Like I'm not too sure if intentional product placement, but like does Burger King really want all their trash on the screen? Is that how they want to portray themselves?
Out loud at that, because there's just this shot of a table. I don't know why he was doing this, but he's like, I gotta clean up real quick. I gotta clean up all this perfectly placed contraband from Burger King, and two oranges. Puts 2 oranges in the sink next to them.
Yeah, it's also weird that he's not putting it in the garbage. He's putting it in the sink. Like he's like, I gotta clean up. I'm gonna put this disposable item into the sink.
But for as ridiculous as
very odd.
For as ridiculous as that scene was, I think my favorite shot in the whole movie is when Kevin's trying to like remember the song, and he's trying to like focus in on the song. And he's like, oh, that sound, and they shoot the like security alarm. Like
it's like a speaker playing music outside in the middle of the night. What is it?
But it's meta because the score stops. So the implication is that they're hearing the score that whole time, which I thought was fun. Like, who wrote that into the movie and got it put into the movie, and nobody was like, wait a second.
It's because if he was humming a song over the score, we'd be confused as dumb audience members.
It's true.
It's also funny that he says, I just need to like hear a tune like once, twice, 3 times, and then I'll just remember it. I'm like, it's like a 5-second long tune, man. Like it's not. You don't need a master musician to remember a tune.
Which is something like not. It's mentioned but not developed, and mostly because it's not incredibly interesting.
No.
But like you can tell it's like you can see like Dark Crystal remnants.
Oh, we got cat attacked.
Cat attack.
Interestingly enough,
still here.
He'll.
Well, let's keep talking.
Yeah.
I thought that the whole thing was kind of. He just seemed pointless as a character for the most part, and this was, I believe, their attempt to have this character have something to do, because I don't even remember what Courteney Cox and him do after they go to Eternia. Do they do anything to help during the fight? I cannot remember. All I remember is He-Man kicking people in the holes.
Courteney Cox is like
she has some really nasty looking wound on her leg.
She has the worst wound I've ever seen on her leg.
Yeah. It looked good, but it was like, why is this in this? This wound would make me wretch as a child,
I think Kevin is just there through that.
Kevin his name's Kevin. 2 Tims. I'm seeing double here. 4 Tims.
I want to. Which one is he going to come on? And I'll kick the other.
I think he's going to show up on the one that says the audio is connecting.
Okay. I won't report him to Zoom.
We can hear
Hello?
you, but we
We
can't
can
see
hear
you.
you, but we can't see you. Your cat just said,
There you go.
You know what I hate when Tim podcasts? I'm going to walk across his keyboard, unplug his microphone and his camera.
We were just talking about how Courteney Cox's leg wound is disgusting and pretty good in terms of like movie magic.
Yes.
Like
So
it-
sorry about that, but yeah, like that's
I was going to say, that leg wound shocked me more than, like, we're going to be watching the fourth Freddy Krueger movie, which were always the grosser ones, and nothing in the first three have shocked me the way that moving the blanket out of the way and showing this like green pus fester.
It's like
which
it's right up there
from
with when he like,
Skeletor's
reveals his
lightning
brain or
blast.
whatever. Yeah, it's like she has some really nasty wound on her leg that like glistening and green. It looks like it's rotting, you know? Like
Yeah.
it's pretty good for as far as leg wounds go.
From getting hit by blue lightning.
Yeah, it's one of those few things in this movie where it's almost out of nowhere. We're like, oh, that's actually someone put time and effort and money into this. It's almost like when they get zapped into the Skeletor's lair in Castle Grayskull, and it's like this section of the alley with a portion of the car there. And like that was actually like that surprised me with how creative that was. And it made me question my theory.
Part of the city block also like came through with them as well.
Yeah, see, that kind of stuff.
It
It's
made
like,
me think of like Terminator 2. Yeah, it was like surprisingly thoughtful, and because like I was operating up to that point with the theory of that like so Mattel was withholding on the budget, so they had to say to hell with this. We'll film the rest in this sleepy town at night, but then the portion of the city ends up in Castle Grayskull, and was like, oh, okay, so I guess this was intentional for them to go to Earth. But there's so much about them going to Earth that I have issues with, but apparently that started as an idea by the director where he wanted it revealed that one of He-Man's parents comes from Earth.
Oh, okay.
He wanted that revealed in the movie, and that was a part of the connecting to Earth. But they ended up saying to hell with that, and then did this whole Courteney Cox dead parents backstory that like it felt like that really doesn't matter to any of this.
It has almost no effect on the movie. She could have been leaving town for any reason. It didn't have to be my parents died in a plane crash.
Yeah, and not even like I think they're supposed to be both high schoolers, which was like I don't buy this for a second. And
yeah.
And like she could have been leaving to go off to college, university, or a job opportunity elsewhere, and he refuses to quit his music career. Could have been all sorts of other things, but instead it's just she alone is packing up and selling the house. And like, are you sure she is just graduating high school? There wouldn't be like a lawyer to do. Are you sure? So it's very inexplicable.
She's 25. He's actually 17, and we've just uncovered a horrible truth about this movie.
Courteney Cox's character.
Yeah, she's a pervert.
Just like the director.
No. We said we were going to.
I mean, allegedly. I think the charges against him were dropped. But there's a lot of He-Man chest in this movie. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm assuming the director applied the oil himself.
Man, I gotta put the oil on you, Dolph. I don't know why you're doing this.
Well, apparently the director wasn't the biggest fan of Dolph Lundgren. That apparently he found his accent to be way too thick. And
what is it, Swedish?
Like, come on, you don't sound like you're from Eternia. You sound like you're I don't know, from Germany. And he's like, I'm not from Germany.
I think he's like from Finland. I think.
he's got that Nordic accent.
He's
got those blonde features. He's got those high cheekbones. He's very tall. He's very buff. We got it since
he's from Sweden.
Since it's beefy boy action
Sweden.
month, we got to talk about his his pecs a little.
And he lives up to it, but I think they were going to do a Hercules in New York thing of dubbing him over, and
it's not that bad.
And then the producers said, well, no, we want to have his voice in the movie, because his career is about to take off. I'm not too sure if this was after Rocky 4 or not.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, it's like right after, isn't it?
So they want to break you. Yeah, I must break you. And so they wanted to continue to propel his career, so people will have to hear his voice. So they had to ADR his lines by him after the fact. So that's a part of why it looks a little disconnected from the movie anyway.
It's extremely obvious many times. Even though he only has about 12 lines in this movie.
He's got like 5 things to say in this movie.
But it's like, people typically associate, the action hero people as being like dummies or whatever. But isn't he like a professor?
Yeah.
Like he's like a mathematician or something crazy. Like he's like a genius or some shit.
Oh, yeah. He's got a doctorate or two under his belt for sure. And he's a language teacher and an engineer. There you go.
Jesus.
But this kind of speaks to the ill-begotten ideas of this director, where it's all these lofty ideas and nobody kind of reining it in. It feels like at times. The one thing that there's one factoid about this movie that I actually love super, super a lot, and I really want to talk about it.
Before you do, one second. There's one more thing that I want to mention about him. He's a certified genius with an IQ of 160, which puts him in the top 0.1% of the world's population.
Of intelligence. Wow.
Yeah.
And like great on him. And it was probably like an unbelievable amount of work to to put up with in order to even make this movie. So to give credit's due.
Everybody talking about dubbing his voice on set, being like, "We're not going to use your real voice anyway, you idiot." And he's like, "I'm actually one of the smartest people on earth."
Actually, I'm just doing advanced physics math right now in my free time. What a dumb thing to do, you dummy. Sorry, Tim. Go ahead. Nerd. And they egg him.
They wedgie him in his leather diaper.
Yeah. He doesn't fight back because geniuses are typically pacifists because they're above that. Yeah. And they give him a swirly.
He comes to work every day, to set every day with his glasses on and they're taped in the middle. Yeah. And he's like, sorry, I'm late again.
And knock his coffee out of his hand.
Yes.
Still wearing your leather diaper, dork?
Okay. All right, let's stop making fun of him before he knocks on your door and he's like, I'm a fan of the podcast. I watch every podcast at the same time because I'm a genius.
I'm a 160 IQ genius.
Anyway, he's also, I like him. When he shows up and stuff, I'm never mad about it,
Yeah, it's
I liked when he showed up in Aquaman for a bit. Yeah. That was fun.
Oh, right. He was in that. I completely forgot about Aquaman.
He played one of the kings of the ocean. I don't know what that movie was about. I've seen it, but I don't remember what it's about.
I hated it.
Played Ariel's dad in Aquaman or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And It's Always Sunny, he played, they go to a movie screening of their, favorite, action hero, and it's that trope of they're passing... Steve, you're probably, at that episode now or
it's
past it.
Death Gun 5.
Yeah, Death Gun 5, and they watch it. It's like he's passing the torch to the younger one, and they're like, why isn't he having sex with somebody and shooting people in the head?
It's like, they're like, why is he giving him that thing? And they're in a test screen or whatever, right? So the person taking notes is like, why is he passing that thing to him? She's like, you mean the torch, the literal torch that he's handing to his son? It's so on the nose that the person's they're just not getting it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't want to talk about that show.
Tim, you were gonna hit us with a revelation.
Right. So there's this superb, awesome character in this movie called Pig Boy.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, there's Pig Boy in this movie.
Talking about this guy?
No, that's Gar.
No.
Or whatever.
That happens to be a boy that looks like
a
pig.
Oh, Pig Boy. Yeah, I remember hearing something about it was a kid that won a contest or something to be in the movie, and then he showed up on set and they're like, put this pig mask on, Pig Boy.
So while Mattel was the one running this contest, and I think they're with how disconnected they were from the production, the contest ran too long, and so by the time they got the winner, which is Richard, and I forget the last name.
Richard Sponder.
Yes. By the time he won the contest, they had already finished filming everything for the Earth scenes, and they weren't doing any more production with any of the Earth shots, and so they had to shove him onto set, and they just put him in this goofy looking costume
Yeah.
and no lines, and there's just this one steady shot of just the pig boy. They don't announce who he is or what he is or why he's there, why it's important that we look at him, but it's just contest winner, cut, and that's it. And
I mean, that's fine.
That's cool.
It's so weird.
That's
but
like in the.
What else are
Super
they gonna do? Have a random child watching
like the
He-Man getting whipped?
It's like the Justin Bailey. Yeah. It's like the Justin Bailey thing from Link to the American Link to the Past, where you can get that room and it says "I'm Justin Bailey" and it's just a bunch of rupees. You just put these things into media back then, and it's cool, and I like that. Interestingly,
I think
enough,
it works a little bit better in a video game.
Works much better in a video game.
Motion picture.
Yeah.
But there was a documentary called Playtime Masters that it shares personal stories of fans who grew up with this movie and with the toy line, and this guy has like a moment in this movie. So it's from 2017, so he did sort of get his flowers eventually. But I looked at the credits and I was like, who the fuck is Pig Boy? And then I remember they just like show this pig person for like a moment.
Yeah. But it also speaks to at probably like, I get that feeling. And once again, this is me like projecting onto this movie, trying to make sense of it. And I got this feeling of like, once I realized who this person was and why it's there, I got like this sense of like, were they just like just running the wheels, get this over with. We've got the contest winner. Sure, we've got leftover stuff from some other terrible future movie. We're just going to put him in there. Don't move. Don't say a word. Just stand on this spot.
Listen,
and
kid,
we'll tell you when you're done.
Yeah, kid, I know the pig mask is too big. Just don't move around a lot. It won't fall off if you stand still.
Yeah,
my pig mask keeps falling off.
It can't look any worse than the. Speaking of bad masks, it's Skeletor's face in this movie. In the comic, in the cartoon, he's a skeleton. He's a skeleton, right?
Yeah.
In this, is he a man whose face kind of looks like a skeleton?
If it was like an actual skeleton, it would be goofy. It'd be too goofy. You know?
I know. I get that, but does he have some sort of mutation that makes his skull protrude? He's got the sunken eyes
have
of a
no
skull.
answer for you. It's like a Red Skull thing.
Yeah, that would have been something that, like, if they were a little more thoughtful, like we can't do an exact skull, but we can't just paint black circles on your nose and call that an empty nose socket.
It's more
like they
thoughtful.
did for Bill and Ted.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's more thoughtful, in my opinion, than in Repo the Genetic Opera, where Paris Hilton's face falls off and she just still has a nose, like a full nose. You know, it doesn't.
Yeah, but you know, for the era and the budget, it's like, what are they gonna do? You know, you can see that thing on his face is not a hole. It's just like
a line drawn on a circle.
Yeah,
and you know, the reason that the Red Skull works so well now is because, you know, CGI, you can just CGI off his nose and not actually be like, all right, Hugo Weaving, we have to cut your nose off for this role, but we'll reattach it when the movie is done filming.
Wait, what are you talking about? That's my Hugo Weaving impression.
It's spot on. If they just kind of like, if you were saying like protruding bones out of it, and if they were building out, they probably would get away with a little bit more. And enough to make it believable and work on camera, but there's so many close-ups of his face, and there should be, because he's giving a great performance. It's like I'll put it there with like Raul Julia in Street Fighter, where he's like living up to the role, and kind of similar to, he took on the role because his son was a big fan of He-Man, Masters of the Universe. And that, like, he remembered his son running around with his Skeletor toy, screaming, "I have the power!" And so he was like, "Yeah, I'm all on board. I want to be a part of this." And it's a big thing for actors, that especially character actors that do a lot of villainous roles, that they want to do roles that their kids can watch, and it's very, very common.
Yeah.
So that lives up to it, I think.
Well, he's a pretty, like, in terms of other stuff that Frank Langella's in, is like, so pretty mature. It's very heady stuff. It's not for kids, so I can understand why he would want it. You know,
like the Ninth Gate.
Yeah, but now he's in like video games and stuff too. Like,
Got to pay for the Hydra somehow.
yep. I assume he's now making the kids movies for his grandchildren, perhaps. I don't know. But yeah, it's a lot of adult content. But like he's in some great films as well. You know, not everything's a Masters of the Universe.
I'm looking at his IMDb now, and it's
yeah, he's like a real journeyman actor. He's in so much stuff.
He was great in Deep Space Nine.
I just passed that as Minister Jarrow.
Mm-hmm. But,
I think everybody in this movie has been in Star Trek at some point.
I think everybody in the history of the world has been in.
It's because there are hundreds of episodes of Star Trek, and it's shot in L.A.
Oh, he was in
grab people off
Cutthroat
the
Island.
Yep, he was the villain Cutthroat Island with Gina Davis.
Yeah,
and not Carrie Elwes.
That other actor that didn't do anything after Matthew Modine.
Matthew Modine, right? Yeah.
I think we already talked about how the poor treatment of Billy Barty and how we all felt really bad for him throughout this movie, because I would consider some of the things they made him do a hate crime. It's like, wouldn't it be funny if this little person was, halfway buried in mud underwater for 30 seconds?
Yeah.
And he's another great actor that is appropriately hammy for this movie. And when I was watching and he's great in UHF, and he's in all sorts of wonderful stuff. And I was thinking, like, boy, oh boy, just putting this awful looking mask on him and dipping him in mud, and what are we doing?
Pouring gravy down his front face hole on the mask, and just like, he's definitely drowning in that sauce.
Can I just say, as ridiculous,
going in his eyes and stuff,
as ridiculous as that stuff is,
they made him jump through fire. Everyone else is leaping over it, and he's like, "Wow!" You're like, he's smaller, man.
The top part of the mask,
him up.
The eye part of the mask, I thought was excellently done. You couldn't tell where his eye ended. It looked really real, in my opinion.
It was very seamless, and that portion, yeah.
It seemed like he maybe couldn't see very well out of it, though, because there's a lot of scenes
where he kept going like this.
Well, that's just kind of what his face is like.
True.
But they had to keep guiding him around everywhere. If you notice, anytime he's in a scene, they're holding his hand and stuff.
His field of vision must be very, very binocular, very narrow.
Yeah.
In that thing.
Anytime there was a staircase, it's like, okay, everybody grab Barty.
And twisting his shoulders around the right direction.
Yeah.
But in costuming, Beastman I thought was okay. I thought whatever the name of the character that's behind in your backdrop, Steve, the guy with
Garg.
Yeah,
Garg.
Yeah, Garg.
I was like, Karg looks like if David Bowie from The Labyrinth, Tina Turner from Thunderdome, and a hairless cat got inside of the machine from The Fly. This is what would come out.
I was thinking if someone shaved the face of a rodent. Yeah.
The acting choices that this actor did for his delivery of lines was so over the top. I like the face makeup. He kind of looks like that those green aliens from the original Star Trek in that famous fight with him.
Oh, the Gorn?
The Gorn.
Yeah.
But that hair, man, I couldn't get over.
He looks like Sindel from Mortal Kombat.
Yes.
And or like a backup singer for an 80s hair metal band.
Also, when Skeletor sacrifices one of them to be like, you guys fucked up, and kills one of them, I was like, kill this man. Doesn't kill him. Keeps him very much alive. It makes him.
You'll never believe who the actor who played Karg. You'll never believe what other show he was on.
Was it Star Trek?
He was a fucking Ferengi.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, and early Star Trek, I think.
Yeah, it was TNG.
Yeah.
Towers.
Yeah, I just looked him up.
This man's still working.
Yeah. There's all sorts of funny parts where fine, if you're gonna make it take place on Earth, then fine. But
oh shit! Hold on, sorry, Tim. Speaking of It's Always Sunny, he played Buster, the jockey, in that episode where they're all trying to sell the drugs. Why don't you do a lineup and let Buster do a line off your boner? It's a great line from It's Always Sunny. Sorry, Tim, I didn't mean to cut you off. I kind of steamrolled you a bit. That's
No
my
worries.
bad.
It's these. That's one thing that is interesting about this movie is that like there's all these ingredients of cool things. It's just an execution. It's so bad. Because I was thinking about how like. So you have this character Blade, and of course his thing is blades, and he has all sorts of blades.
That's so many blades. He's got wrist rockets, but they're blades. He's got little blades. He's got long blades. He's got blades on his hat. He's a blade guy.
So that's fine. If you're going to keep it like very simplistic, that's fine. But you may as well make use of it, and they didn't really do it. Like they had that one claustrophobic sword fight, one of the 3 sword fights in the movie.
He sticks them in the ground and almost stabs Courteney Cox. There is one part where they're like roughing up Tom Paris or whatever his name is. And Blade takes a knife out and stabs it like right next to his head. Yeah. And all I could think was like, I don't know if I would let an actor in an eye patch stab a real knife that close to me. Like
he seems to be focusing more on grimacing than aim. Yeah.
But I mean, if you cover one eye, your depth perception is not going to be great.
Yeah,
and that guy didn't seem like he was proficient in the blades that he uses. Ironically enough, considering his character.
Yeah, like it's strange that like you have men at arms and like you don't really.
He doesn't have a bunch of guns like he's supposed to.
Yeah, I mean, at least in Transformers, like they talk about how Ironhide has a lot of guns, and then they show off him holding guns in the Michael Bay Transformers movies. Like, have men at arms bear arms and give other people guns and all that kind of stuff.
I don't think like He-Man ever used guns really in the show.
I mean,
I'm not overly.
Yes, but like in a very not going to shoot people directly thing because we still want to have this on TV for kids. Oh yeah.
Makes sense.
It's like a melee weapon in one hand and a gun in the other because the one mold of the hand that they had for all the different toys was in the shape of holding a gun.
Right.
Yeah.
I do think that, there's something a little bit more innocent about
right here.
There's something more innocent about a movie in which people are shooting each other with lasers and little sparks are coming off because you're like, maybe they're not dead. Maybe they just got, zapped. They're just unconscious. But then you see Principal Strickland with a shotgun just blowing guys away.
Blasting.
And you're like, this is
so incredibly misplaced. Like, because
that whole character is misplaced. He's like fucking
I hate Lubeck so much in this movie.
He's like a weird like city cop or something, like a hard-boiled
like
detective.
He's supposed to be from New York.
Yeah. But he's like, why is he here? Like, did he get like fired? He's like, now I gotta move to
because he kept pulling shotguns
Middle
out
America
to bust
shooting people,
small time criminals
down the street with a shotgun on his shoulder, like he's a
like he's one step away from saying that, and I'm retiring tomorrow or something.
Yeah.
Like it was so unbelievably cliched, but it was like
there's like one part where he says something like he walks around a corner and he's like, I was in Korea and I ain't never seen nothing like that before. Like he's just talking about like a tank. A tank piloted by a skeleton? Yeah, of course, no one has.
A flying tank. Yeah.
A hover tank with a skeleton man on top of a big stick.
I've been to Korea. I've never seen a mostly naked man before. But like it's so out of place, and it's weird because there's already Courteney Cox and Tom Paris to react to all these weird things for the audience. There's no need for another person to be gobsmacked by aliens from another world for us. We already have that taken care of.
Like the only reason is that like there's so much havoc happening that they need to have some sort of police presence because it wouldn't make sense otherwise. But like, just police can just be chasing him around. Yeah. And like you're right though. He's like the most overblown. He should be constantly chewing gum and eating nuts,
threatens Kevin at one point.
Smoking cigarettes. Talking about his ulcer.
He's like, if you don't give me that gun, I'll arrest you and put you in prison for 850 years. Is the thing he says in this movie. He also has a weird moment where like he finally realizes that like what he's seeing is like real. It's not like crazy cultists or whatever he says earlier. Yeah. And he's like, it's an invasion, and then just keeps like going. And you realize that like this guy is just crazy. Like he's pushed over the edge completely. completely like made senile by these events.
He probably like shot somebody while on duty, and then they put him on desk work, and he's like, "I'm out of this place.
Yeah,
You can't contain me."
Went to Middle America, where he thought nothing crazy is ever going to happen until a man on a hover car comes through with a bunch of soldiers with the face of a skeleton. And...
But he still dresses like he just got back from a triple homicide constantly. And you're like, okay.
Yeah.
With a styrofoam coffee cup in his hand.
Yeah.
A
toothpick in his mouth. Just...
And then they don't know what to do with him, so let's leave him a part of the governing council of Eternia, I guess.
Why does he get to sit on the dais? He's just like, why would I leave?
Strange.
I got loose-fitting robes. I'm naked under here. And I got a beautiful woman. Like, who's that lady? When did he meet her? During the battle?
I do not know.
That's the sorceress.
And like, yeah, the sorceress, which, I mean, that's explained well enough as far as the value of it, but it's essentially, if this was the Dark Crystal, it would be the crystal talking to people kind of thing.
Right, yeah. And I mean, the sorceress is a character from the show as well, right? Like, she's the one who gives him his He-Man powers.
Yeah.
I'm going to quickly turn into a bird or something.
I'm going to quickly run down who's on the show and who isn't, just to get that out of the way, because I have it pulled up here. He-Man, Skeletor, Teela, Evelyn, Beastman, Sorceress of Castle Grayskull, Duncan / Man-at-Arms, Sorod, Man-at-Arms, all those are the same. And then people who are not, Karg, Pigboy, Julie, Detective Lubeck, Kevin.
Detective Lubeck's not in the show?
Carl the
it's like
janitor.
Wildly out of place character in Eternia. Being like...
Charlie. Narrator.
My favorite Eternia character, Charlie.
Charlie. He's the guy that owns the fucking music store. And it's just like, always like, what is going on?
Yeah.
I've seen one of these
before. It's Japanese. Yeah, okay, man. You're all but
remember when police detective is like toying around with the crystal synthesizer, and he starts like cackling and laughing madly with it in his hands? That was also very, very strange.
So weird. Such a weird character. Like, he's so needlessly aggressive. Remember, like, he tries to run into the building to save his girlfriend. And he's like, what's your girlfriend's name, huh? And he's like grabbing him, like, and he's like, I gotta go find her. Like, she could be hurt. And he's like, all right, you're coming with me. He's like, what? Where are we going? He's like, we're going to your girlfriend's house. And he's just like yelling at him. And it's like, why are you being?
And I'm in charge of this crime scene, but I'm leaving it. I'm just leaving it.
I didn't do anything. We'll see about that.
We'll see about that, kid.
You smell like smoke. It's like, we're next to a fire. It's not me. We'll see about that.
But that's the funny thing, is that like they thought to add in a police element so that it would make slightly more sense, but then do things with the police that the police wouldn't do, and therefore make even less sense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just like these ideas that don't really go beyond their incubation, and that's it.
Maybe they didn't get teleported to our Earth. They got teleported to an Earth where nothing makes sense.
Stupid world.
To a night world filled with chicken.
Everybody only eats chicken and ribs. Or no, they just call ribs. They call chicken ribs there. They don't call it chicken. They just call it ribs.
Well, it's funny. It's funny, Steve, that you mentioned earlier that you're like primarily a vegetarian for the reasons you are primarily a vegetarian, because there is that scene where they steal the bucket of chicken at the beginning and they're eating it, and they realize that it's meat, and they're all grossed out by it.
They're disgusted by it, except for Man-at-Arms, which implies that maybe Man-at-Arms has like eaten whatever race like the Beastman is, you know?
Yeah.
He killed a Beastman and like ate him.
The roast beast.
Yeah.
It implies that the Eternians are vegetarian, I guess, though.
Yeah, I think they're supposed to be like enlightened, and they care about all creatures and stuff.
Except for
Skeletor. They're supposed to be like.
But Beastman is like tearing into people and just eating human flesh and stuff.
It's true.
This guy eats meat.
That guy.
This guy behind me eats meat.
The guy also eats pond scum, is what he looks like.
Or he just eats dirt. Like he just only eats dirt.
I get all the nutrients I need from dirt. Handfuls of dirt.
Sounds like he's voiced by Frank Oz. The intro and outro music score, did they just completely rip off Superman, or?
Yep.
The score is also something in the ongoing list of inexplicable things for this movie. The score is it's either bland or a ripoff. Meanwhile, it's done by somebody who has this I forget his name, but the composer has this long history of all these great scores that he's done, and like it feels like phoned in, and especially not even just with the sound of the score, but like the fact that like it's the highlighted letters where it's like beaming back and you're not too sure if it's like going forward or back on you, but it's absolutely that same aesthetic as Superman, except it's like rainbow colors instead of like a solid blue, if I recall correctly.
It's also one of those things, like, I never really understand it, but it's the same with a lot of, I mean, they're remedying it now a little bit with Marvel movies, but like they have an intellectual property that's based on a visual medium already that has music, and they just refuse to use the theme. Like the theme from He-Man is kind of great, and they could have turned it into this like amazing orchestral version, but instead they're like, no, we got to make a new thing.
I think Spider-Man is like the first time they did that in a modern way, where they just kind of have the.
That's what I mean to say. They're remedying it now. Like they had the X-Men riff when Professor X showed up in the Doctor Strange movie. Yeah.
So just
like
Bill
if
Conti,
you go to the
director,
that's his name.
Person that did the music did like, I'm looking at his IMDb now, and he did like everything. He did like Cagney and Lacey.
Done a lot, yeah.
He did like Lean on Me. He did like Karate Kid Part 3. He did like Dynasty, Falcon Crest, Ghost Dad.
He did all the Karate Kids. He skipped over all the Karate Kids and said Karate Kid Part 3.
He did in the same year. In the same year, he did Rookie of the Year and American Gladiators. And then he did the next Karate Kid.
He made American Gladiators theme song? That's dope.
Yep.
Yeah,
which sounds a lot like the He-Man theme. Just so you guys are aware.
But he's no slouch. So it does feel it's it's very bland at times, or it just seems like a straight ripoff, which might have been a direction from either the director or the producers saying just echo into Superman. People love Superman. Let's just keep at it. It's just very unremarkable, and which is unfortunate, because like you look at to your point of echoing or homaging the original theme, like you look at the opening for the Transformers 1985 animated movie, where after the opening with Unicron eating the planet, it just cuts into the band Lion doing their version of the Transformers theme. So like you already have the property rights for He-Man, so why not like just get a hair metal band to go for it, especially or a synth band if you want to stick with the whole synthesizer thing.
Especially where when Kevin first walks into Charlie's like music shop, we hear Purple Haze. So it's not like this. It's not like the sound people in this movie were like trying to stay away from like modern songs. Like there's clearly a soundtrack that has a bunch of probably weird like 80s songs.
I don't remember any other music in it except for that.
Except for the
because it's so weirdly out of place, just like everything in the movie.
Yeah.
It's a lot of like cobbled together ideas. It feels like they just made it as they went.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Roger Corman, who was like the head of Canon for years, he was like notorious for being very creative with budgets and being able to stretch budgets like crazy. And he would do things like hire a composer to score a movie, and then if there were any leftover tracks that didn't get used for that movie, he would utilize it for another movie rather than hiring the guy
and buy it at wholesale essentially.
But he would do that kind of stuff all the time. And I made the ribbing earlier where I said that Canon has made trash, but they have also made lots and lots of really good stuff too. Like that's it's just because they made so much stuff that you're eventually going to find like the diamond in the rough kind of thing, right? But I think that was sort of his mentality as the head of a pretty major studio, was just give things modest budgets and just make lots and lots of it, and eventually something's going to slap and make you all the money back that you spent on like 10 movies. You know, as long as one of those movies breaks the bank, then you know you've got all the money back for the stinkers. But and you never really know when it comes to these sort of low budget movies who's going to come in and prove to be creative and prove to make something interesting that then catches like wildfire and you know essentially makes you that budget back. I was just looking at the canon list and I was like, I can't even go through this. There's so many. It's crazy. It's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Yeah.
Well, so I've heard you mention this film production company a few times on this show. I've never really dialed down.
Once you see enough canon, you start to get excited when you see the canon logo at the beginning. So you're like, oh, here we go. This is probably going to be real bad or real good. We'll find out.
Yeah, but entertainingly bad or good, and
you don't really.
And sometimes unhinged.
Yeah, it's rare that you find a canon movie that's just absolute trash that you like are uninvested in. You get invested even in the trash a lot of the time. You know, like like the Death Wish movies, like as like hokey as they are, like you're just kind of waiting for the big denouement of everyone getting shot and murdered at the end. Yeah. Like, when is Charles Bronson going to go on a killing spree already?
And not blink. That's the thing that's also feels kind of awful for this movie, where like you kind of you look at other movies at that time that got away with huge amounts of violence, but still they wanted to market to kids, like famously RoboCop.
Yeah,
where it's incredibly violent. Yeah, and you want to get as many toys to kids as possible, or
same
Predator, or anything.
Rambo. They made a cartoon show of Rambo in the late 80s.
Yeah,
like,
what's crazy? The action figures for RoboCop, I remember you could put like a cap in the little gun, like cap, caps, like Captain Cap, and they would shoot off out of his gun, and then they were less than 10 years later, 5 years later, they were concerned with like Batman Returns toys at McDonald's. Like, it's crazy how like
that was sort of like manufactured outrage, the McDonald's stuff.
I believe it.
I believe that. That's sort of like, you look at our society today and what people are complaining about. Like, there's the video on TikTok right now of that guy losing his mind because you can choose a pronoun in a video game, and it's like, dude, just select he, him, and forget about it. Like, what the fuck's wrong with you? Yeah.
I'm more mad. I'm angrier that people are like panning that game because they're bored by it. Like, fucking, it's a Fallout game. It's Fallout.
Yeah. It is. It's Fallout in space.
Yeah.
Starfield. Okay.
Starfield is dope. That's my Baldur's Gate
12 hours last night. Yeah. I started playing it and then I looked at the clock. I'm like, it's almost 4 a.m. I've been playing this for like 12 hours. And I didn't care and I wanted to keep playing. And then I woke up 4 hours later to do some work. So I'm operating on very little sleep.
Okay, well, it makes sense that this movie couldn't hold your attention and you fell asleep.
Yeah, I fell asleep, yeah. It wasn't the fact that they had a really boring fight in a junkyard in the middle of a city full of lazy boy boxes.
I don't know what that was.
It's like they asked the entire crew to just bring in some trash that day. They're like, hey, anybody got some trash at home? Just bring it in tomorrow. We're going to fill this alley with boxes.
Right. It's one of their warehouses, and like you don't need to you don't need a permit to film on a property you already own. Just do it. Just film in front of the studio. Just do it.
Yeah, and they just fill it with whatever trash they can find because it's there.
And that I don't mind. It boils down to just being thoughtful with how you're using these things. Yeah. And you're right. Like Corman famously made much better use of that limited budget and finding some creative solutions and mishmashing things together. Yeah. But it felt like none of that inspiration really was there for this, and without that kind of spark of life, the movie just starts to drag on. And like I remember saying out loud, was watching it yesterday, and just saying like, "Oh God, like this has to be over soon." And as soon as I said that out loud, they're like, okay, let's go back to Eternia now. Like, dude, okay, good.
The same thing happened with me when Skeletor is like, he rises up behind them. He rises up behind them, and he like the whole moment happens, and then he lowers away, and they go back to Eternia. I was like, oh, this shit's gonna be over in 10 minutes. They're just gonna go to Eternia and fucking beat Skeletor. 28 minutes were left on the run.
Yeah.
And I was like, what?
It didn't end. You're like, end already, because then there's like another 10 minutes of them trying to fix the saxophone, and you're like, He-Man getting slapped around, and you're like, we know what's gonna happen. They're gonna fix it, and they're gonna get there. Just skip this, please.
With like the power of hope or whatever. You please just do.
Because they needed boring Tom Paris to have something to do, so they're like, he's a musician, so he remembers the saxophone noise or whatever. I will say the effect of the lights coming out of that thing. Every time it happened, I was like, that's pretty good. That looks all right. Yeah, that's a pretty good effect.
It works to effect for sure.
Yeah, a lot of the special effects in this movie were fine, if not good. I think that where this movie excels is like its visuals a lot of the time. It's just a dog shit it's a dog shit script is the thing. It's like...
You mean Grim shooting a gun in the air? You don't think that should be in this movie? Remember when he shoots a pistol in the air to get everyone's attention?
Yeah.
Like, holy shit, brother. Cut that gun down. Somebody take that gun away from this creature.
That goes back to what you were saying about, like, at least when they're shooting lasers, like, if a person gets hit by a laser, they're just, they're lasered. But when you're shooting bullets with gunpowder,
it feels too real.
It's like when Lubeck, like when he's in fucking Castle Grayskull, just like unloading rounds.
Yeah,
that's the loudest thing in the room.
Yeah, everyone's shooting like very conservative volume level laser guns, and it's like, and he just
I was in Korea.
It's like blowing guys' heads off.
It's like shaking the set.
Yeah,
so much.
If I wouldn't be surprised if he was on Skeletor's side with the amount of violence coming from this angry man, this angry detective.
Or some of that buckshot was hitting some of the Eternians. Anyway,
I sort of in that final scene where he's just there with the sorceress, just like, "What's up? This is my girlfriend now." I sort of took.
Was that the sorceress? I thought it was just some random lady, but I guess maybe it was the sorceress.
I sort of why would they hire like another? There's no extras in this movie. Why did they hire another person for that?
I mean, most certainly, old, I thought.
And then I think it was just her returned back to youth. At any rate, my point is, he sort of just took over Skeletor's role in Eternia because he's got like a bald head. That's what that looked like to me. Like, now Skeletor's vanquished.
Yeah, he's gonna get acid thrown in his face, and he'll be the new Skeletor.
The cycle continues.
You're almost as white as him.
Yeah,
it's like,
and instead of carrying around like an intimidating looking staff, he's gonna just have a shotgun resting on his shoulder.
It's like the Legend of Zelda. There always has to be a villain, and there always has to be a hero, right?
So, well, if you stick around for the post-credit sequence, you'll see that Skeletor will be back.
He's just in their pool in the basement there.
Yeah, I guess at the bottom of those pits. Yeah, so He-Man didn't actually kill anybody. He was just throwing them into a pool.
Which, that kind of tracks with the whole thing of Mattel not wanting He-Man to have killed anybody directly.
So funny if there was a whole shitload of them down there, because he throws so many people in the hole. It'd be great if there was a bunch of them being like, "How do we get out of here?" Like,
they're all like bobbing in their outfits. Yeah.
But alas, that did not happen.
No.
So they the reason that they really need to get back to Eternia, the ticking clock that they add, is that Julie is gonna die because she gets shot by a Skeletor. I thought Skeletor was maybe just being kind of like, I'm not super evil, I'm not gonna like kill these innocent people from this world. And then it's like, no, he's just letting them die slower.
Yeah, that's actually a good point that you mentioned that, because Skeletor, for as evil and as shitty as he is, he does have some morals, because he does promise that this is a promise you don't see like come to fruition very frequently in movies in general, where the villain says, "Hey, if you give me the hero, if you give me He-Man and let me take him back and make him my slave, I'll leave you guys alone." And then He-Man, because he's like the greatest good, he's like, "I'll go back with you.
I'll go. Yeah.
I'll go." And they start whipping him and torturing him and shooting lasers at him. And if those guys wanted to, they could have just stayed on Earth and not go back and try to, save He-Man.
Well, then Courteney Cox would have died because she had been shot in the leg and was rotting to death or whatever.
Well, she got rotted out, and
she got shot by Skeletor's rod.
His rot rod. Yeah. It's like Scooby-Doo shows up. I hate that joke
But
I just made.
then in the final fight, He-Man looks up and says, "You promised you would hurt them," and then Skeletor says, "I lied.
I'm a liar. He's like, whoa.
That's actually a really good
Lying's bad."
Yeah. He also looks so dumb. Skeletor, when he gets his power or whatever, his ultimate power, he's like, finally, I will be a true master of the universe. And then he gets transformed into like what I can only describe as like one of those AI filters that makes you look like a shitty Mortal Kombat character or whatever.
That's a really good point.
It, a lot of this was giving me like, it was making me think of like Power Rangers when like they would put somebody in a goofy costume and they had no range of movement and they can't see out of their masks and their makeup, and so they're overacting to try to fill the camera frame enough.
But I mean, just think about how difficult it would have been to move around with that giant ass helmet on. Like, it would probably was just like wobbly and strange, and like you could tell during the fights that he's trying not to move it around that much.
Hey Steve.
Yeah, it's probably top heavy. Yeah.
Hey Steve, can you say the part about I want to be the ultimate master of the universe again? Just one sec.
Finally, I will.
That's when they said the name of the movie in the movie
of the universe. Timing was a little off.
The timing was a little off, and they didn't really say the name of the movie in the movie, but it's as close as we've got for some time. Yeah.
But I mean, the movie is just called Masters of the Universe. It's not called He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he pretty much said that.
What if you were the master of music, though?
The master of music? Are you a master?
You are. I knew it. I knew you were.
I can do.
No, I'm just a piece of shit.
No, you're not a piece of shit.
I am. I'm a piece of shit.
I can do another segment. Try this out.
It's tougher. Oh,
the Home Alone of it all.
When is the Home Alone of all?
If I only play that much of it, we won't get DMCA'd.
Right. I keep forgetting to remake that. I'll try and get it done at some point.
Just put some, stock Christmas music over it instead.
No, I'll just do an a cappella version of it.
Ding 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 ding. So, Tim, we have a little segment on the show we like to call the Home Alone of it all. Basically, in the movie Home Alone, the movie for me begins when he slaps down the blueprint and puts up the traps for the burglars. Nope. In
purple burglar alarm.
In other films, I've noticed that the attraction for the film comes from that Home Alone of it all moment, because when you go to see Home Alone, you want to see Kevin McAllister do all the horrible things to the burglars. If you think of other movies like, say, Gremlins, when the Gremlins come out and start doing a reverse Kevin McAllister, that's the Home Alone of it all for the movie Gremlins. In the movie Masters of
this movie?
In the movie Masters of the Universe, starring Dolph Lundgren and Frank Langella, what is the Home Alone of it all? In my opinion, I think it's when, it's either when they get to Earth or when they get back to Eternia, because when they get back to Eternia, at least the movie's going to be goddamn over soon. But when they get to Earth, it's sort of, the bulk of the movie just happens on Earth. Like, it's like a reverse fantasy movie in that way, where the fantasy characters come to Earth instead of like a fish out of water going to a fantasy world. So, discuss. I've said my piece. I want to hear what you guys have to say.
Well, I would say... I would say it does, in my opinion, it does happen on Earth, but it doesn't really happen until the four mercenaries arrive. And that's when it starts to happen, even though it doesn't really follow any rules of threes, or there's nothing really action or fun or entertaining about it.
Nope.
But at least, like, He-Man fighting characters from Eternia starts to happen. Instead of him fighting faceless drones, he's fighting named characters. And you see Dolph Lundgren actually doing something, because for the longest time Dolph Lundgren doesn't do anything in this movie. So I would say that the Home Alone of it all is when those characters arrive and it motivates the character of He-Man, the main character of the movie, to start. That's what I think.
I mean, I have kind of a facetious answer, but because I I would say it's when they go to Earth if I was giving my true answer, but my opinion is the Home Alone of it all happens when the movie starts, and then Home Alone ends when they go to Earth, and then it doesn't restart again until they go back to Eternia.
Yeah.
Look,
Like it's not a good part, but it's the part where it happens.
Yeah.
Tim, I like that you mentioned fighting the named characters, because for me, I think Beastman is my favorite part of the whole movie because at least he's like represented. I should have added in my history of it all that do you remember you remember Bam Margera and remember CKY? Remember all that?
Yes.
Okay.
For like the Jackass guys, but before Jackass. Anyway, they had a band called something. They would do like internet fucking memes basically on E-Bomb's World. But there was this one called Skeletor versus Beastman. I don't even remember it, but I'll play an excerpt from it just because I can do this now.
Mm-hmm.
Skeletor, I know you groove and shake it so damn good. And when you come on through my hood, I'll give you a piece of what. You furry fool, I know, and I will not disagree. But there's one thing we don't like, and it starts with He-Man. Oh no, I don't know which way to...
Anyway,
Wow, the sound quality is absolute shit.
yeah, the video is from 2001.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what the internet used to sound like, ladies and gentlemen.
It's true. Now we have microphones. But the video for it is like the guys from CKY / like Jackass, and it's just this ridiculous song about Skeletor and Beastman basically fucking, I think, or fighting. And whenever that's my closest connection to He-Man. Really. That song is the thing I know the most about. So at least seeing Beastman represented in this pretty well. He doesn't look exactly like he did on the show, as I recall, either, but he's there.
Not exactly.
Close enough, though.
He's their heavy. He's their heavy who murders without any sort of...
That brings up a very good point where like they could have gone through something far more thoughtful for He-Man and his adversaries, where each one of them is like representing like a partial antithesis of He-Man, where there's somebody who is equal in his strength and equal in his sword ability and equal, but they don't really see it through. Mostly like he's not more reptilian than the Reptile Man or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
if you were to, I don't know, it's not quite there. It's not quite realized, and just fumbling through it.
There's so many ways you could fix this movie. Like while I was watching it, there were like 10 other things in my mind that I'm like, this would fix it. This would fix it. This would fix it. And it's like, it's easy to say in hindsight, but even while I was watching it, I was like, why aren't they doing this instead? This would make so much more sense. Didn't take a lot of thought, and it didn't take thought afterwards. It was thought during, which should not happen while you're watching a movie. You shouldn't be thinking while you're watching it, I know how to fix this.
Yeah.
But I mean, you think about something like Thor, the first Thor movie, where he gets banished from Asgard and sent to Earth, and it's a fish out of water sort of comedy where he's having to deal with the realities of Earth, being a being from something drastically different than what we're used to. And it's funny because he's like, you know, he smashes the coffee cup and he eats all the pancakes or whatever, and he's hot, and everybody's like, ooh la la, he's hot.
But he's also going through the
buy a horse, and like, you know,
and he's also going through the motions of being powerless and that, and he's like earning his licks again.
Right.
And like there's none of that. There's no character arc.
This
for
movie
anybody.
is like, they go through the portal and then they're like, where'd the key go? Oh no, we lost the key. And then Tom Paris finds it, and then he's running around the city. They're all separate, running around the city with no direction whatsoever. They're just like, I don't know, I'll go look over there. Hey lady, why are you running around?
It's weird too because in that
there's a monster chasing me. Monster.
In that whole opening, when they first get to the planet, they're immediately like, oh, we made it through. I lost the key. Also, let's just split up immediately.
Yeah. Let's all split up and not follow any of us. We'll follow these two boring fucking teenagers instead. And like, you want to see He-Man doing stuff like sleuthing around the town, maybe trying to hide from people. But no, the town's empty. No one lives here except for the entire population of the town works at the music store, I guess. And like
one person, and the police station, which is Lubeck. And then they do show the police force, and they are all geriatric. They're all like 90 years old. They look,
and there's no police
scratching
station.
Their heads with the barrel of their guns. Like,
how
did this happen?
There's no police station either. They just like take their police cars home and park them in their driveways, and then they go to work in the morning. They just get out of their driveway.
Very much
they just drive around all day looking for
cop
crimes.
Now.
Yeah.
This movie was made in a time where people didn't question this kind of stuff, but like. It goes beyond
1987. People definitely were questioning this kind of stuff.
It goes beyond that. Even
the logic of the movie is not there.
This is so like devoid of logic that in the year of our Lord 2023, where we're trying to like process what we watched, analyze what we've seen, and try to like figure out what the fundamental point of this movie is. This movie is pointless. This movie doesn't have any sort of message. It's not even fun to watch He-Man do his thing because he like doesn't get a sword in this movie, and He-Man's whole thing is holding a sword like this and saying like, I'm the most powerful man and I have the power.
Yeah. Well, it's like they need his sword to be able to give Skeletor the power or whatever, right? That's the point, is that they need his sword, I guess. But they also are like worried about the other key for some reason. I don't fully get
There's
that.
9,000 MacGuffins in this movie. It's ridiculous.
And like at the very end, by the way, this is also time travel. Wait,
I can send you back to any time you want. I can send you to the future even.
Oh, your cat is acrobatic in the background.
Do you know what I wrote down when I realized that she had been sent back to like the day before her parents got killed? I wrote, "Oh, you're gonna get Final Destination."
There's an assassin behind you.
You're gonna be driving on a highway now, and a fucking log truck is gonna explode and fucking kill everybody in the truck.
Like it's like death is gonna find a way to kill these two, just because otherwise, what's your motivation? My cat. She always goes on top of the door.
That's the most action-packed thing we've ever had on this fucking show before. That's
yeah, this is better than He-Man.
Yeah, this is better than He-Man.
It's way better than He-Man.
How is she staying up there like that?
She loves going on top of the doors. She's all about it.
She's chasing her tail on top of a door. This is better than the He-Man movie.
Cats are very agile creatures.
Yeah, I know that. Cats are my favorite creatures, okay, Steve?
All right, well.
It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
The physics of it are blowing my mind.
There's a bunch of other cats behind the door that are holding her up.
Speaking of it, this is something I remember from originally watching this movie as a kid and being upset that there was no Battle Cat.
Yeah,
or Panther. At that time, I wouldn't put it past canon to paint a cat, a jungle cat purple and drag it onto set.
Yeah.
But like even still, like it just kind of speaks to more to like there's so much visual cues you could use from the show available to you, and to do none of it. And then when you do have characters, they look nothing like you have to be told that that's Man-at-Arms, not actually know offhand by looking at it.
And it's so strange to me because he has this massive like pantheon of villains, right? Like that's the whole thing, is that like every month it's like 5 new bad guys for He-Man to fight, and they took one
and they made up characters,
and then they made up some other ones that are way more boring than any character in He-Man that exists already.
And like you can understand like Mattel, who's trying to sell toys, for them to be like, I'm not giving you a one red penny until I see another character from the show we made.
I want Fister or whatever his name is.
Fisto?
Fisto, yeah.
I know there's one character that just has a boulder for a hand. Is that the one you're talking about?
There's a guy whose name is Fister or Fisto, and like in the Kevin Smith version, the new one, he points his fist to the sky and he says, "Prepare to get fisted."
Yeah.
Pretty great.
Kevin Smith wrote that line. He wrote that line and then wrote backwards, is what I feel like happened.
I have this great idea for a new He-Man treatment.
I've yet to watch the new He-Man show.
It's
I've heard
pretty good, man. It's pretty good. It's better than this, that's for sure. And they do a more interesting story. I mean, it's kind of how I think they should have told this tale. But I'll talk about that maybe in my outro, because I do have sort of an idea of how this movie could be improved.
I think that
even if you just tweaked like one or two things,
I think
make
that
the story more interesting.
It would have been cool if they did sort of. I don't know if you guys watched Mutant Mayhem, but I watched Mutant Mayhem this weekend, the new Turtles movie, and that movie jams every fucking villain ever into it somehow, and it makes sense. And it would be really fun if instead of making up a bunch of characters, they put in. Here, I'll just run down the A's. Addy Ren, Admiral Scurvy, Andros, Anti-He-Man.
Let's not do this.
Aqua
I don't think people want to listen to you listing
Agrazoid,
names.
Asdar, that's it. That's the A's.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I mean, you even said it yourself earlier, this era of filmmaking, like Ninja Turtles 2 did not put in popular characters from their cartoon show and comic series.
But they also did, because it has Baxter Stockman in it.
I know, but they didn't take Bebop and Rocksteady. They replaced them with two characters that didn't exist. My theory is that they wanted to make new things so they could sell more toys. Which is fine. You can have new stuff, but that's
what they did with the 1985 Transformers animated movie. The whole premise of it was to kill off old characters and introduce new ones. Yeah.
But it's like you have a toy chest, right? Like, take all the toys out and use them, and then you can add more. It's not like they added 14 new characters to this movie. They added 3.
and withheld on 50.
Yeah.
And a movie version of Orko would have been way cooler than Gwildor or whatever the fuck. I can't remember
still have Billy
10 minutes later.
But still have Billy Barty. Like Billy Barty could still rock that character, no problem. Yeah. It's just this another just ill-conceived idea in execution, and
I do
I don't know if
the idea that Steve said about Orko looking too much like a Jawa, and isn't there a character from?
I don't know. That's not a real theory. I'm just like,
that's not a real theory. That's a Steve theory.
Yeah.
And also, isn't there a character from like Conan that kind of looks like Orko as well?
I thought you were gonna say like He-Man. I'm like, yeah, Conan looks like He-Man.
Very directly. I don't know of any, like the only magician character from the first Conan movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger is played by Mako, and it's just a Japanese man in the movie. There's nothing else to him.
Yeah, the Conan movies don't really have like magic. It's like their magic in primitive time is like people's interpretation of magic was just like somebody throwing a fireball at you, but it's like
or slowly turning into a snake. Like it's very arm's length and understated. But like with Orko, you could easily make him looking almost, I mean, he essentially looks like a black mage from Final Fantasy. So
I was gonna say, I was gonna bring that up. I looked up if there was a direct correlation, and nobody can really agree. But
it's a small creature with a hidden face. It's like
it's
all over iconography of tons of stuff, right?
But it is literally like that's what kind of wizard like mages look like, right?
Hold a muscle in my neck when I was doing my Billy Barty impression.
You gotta practice. I
gotta stretch before I do Billy Barty.
But it is widely regarded that the He-Man series predates Final Fantasy 1 by a little bit, and it is some people consider that the Black Mage is based off of the Orko character.
Well, I remember watching, there's a show called The Toys That Made Us. I think there's a few different renditions of the show, but there's one specifically talking about toys, and they have an episode on the He-Man action figures, and I think they even made like a full-length documentary on the action figure of He-Man at some point as well. But I remember just like the primary designer, like sort of like the brain, the master of the universe behind Master of the Universes, he would just like have a sketchbook and just draw monsters over and over, and then he would take them to like the modelers and like the president of the company, and he'd be like, all of them, make them all, let's go. Can they have a vehicle or something? I mean, well, it's a fantasy world. It's like a fantasy world with vehicles, crazy, make some tanks. He can still ride a cat.
Give the cat a hat.
But also, it's probably super cheap to make because everything from the neck down was the same, just different colors.
Yeah, they just used the same mold. I think that's literally like they actually just used the same mold for every character and changed the head and like gave them different accessories
Except
and
for
costumes.
Like, the moss one and the drill guy.
You add the moss later. It's the same body underneath the moss.
I think okay, but that drill one, the driller or whatever, you just push him down and then he pops. His arms didn't move; they were stuck by his side. Like
I don't remember any of this.
Yeah.
What's an action figure?
I remember I buried them in the sand. Remember, I got rid of them.
No, you found them buried in the sand.
But I had them. They were mine for like 30 minutes.
I found a Casey,
I buried them again.
I found a Casey Jones under those same circumstances in a ditch, and I kept it. And many years later, I used to play this game called Throw the Ninja Turtles action figure as high in the air as you can throw it. I'm workshopping the name to this day, and just let it fall and explode. And I let it explode and didn't collect the pieces, and that's where it ended up.
War grave ground.
So, I mean, these are all fun points. They're not really about the movie, but it is about He-Man as a franchise. And I think that He-Man as a franchise is like, it's pretty good. I like it. You know, I like He-Man and I like She-Ra and I like the universe that they exist in, which is why this movie is so disappointing to me because they don't spend any time in Eternia. There are 3 wide shot or long shots of Eternia and they're all the same shot. They just reverse it. They keep reversing the shot. You're like, what? That's the same shot reversed.
And I'm convinced that like it's somewhere in northern Italy or southern Spain.
It's probably places. Some leftover footage from some other weird Italian movie or something. You know, yeah, probably.
Yeah. Or Your Hunter from the Future.
Yeah, but it's like the first time it happened, I was like, that was just the same shot because it's like a guy. There's like people walking and like the same amount of people. I think it was just the same shot, and then they do it again. They reverse it again, and you're like, they're just flip flopping this image back and forth. But you know, like I mentioned earlier, like I run D&D for a group of friends of mine, and we do a homebrew game. Jason's played a couple times, but the world grew to a point that I hadn't really realized this. But then when I watched the new She-Ra and the new He-Man, I'm like, the world that I made is basically like Masters of the Universe. I've set up all the D&D rules and races and magic items and everything, but they also just exist in a world that could just be He-Man. And it's fun.
Yeah. Like, I think it's fair play to have like similarities and all that. Yeah, because it was funny. I was actually mentioning to a buddy at work today that I was going to be doing this tonight, and he was like, "Oh, what movie?" And I gulped and said, "Masters of the Universe." And then, as we were talking about it, he was thinking about Flash Gordon and kind of crossing his wires about it.
Right.
But it made sense that he kind of made that comparison in his head and ran with it because, especially in this movie, there's a lot of similarities, but not necessarily to the detriment of the film or to this type of storytelling. It's I would say it's fair game to have those similarities. It's just like there's nothing really done with it, and when they do something with it, it's just Burger King trash in the sink for some reason.
That was crazy. That was a crazy thing to see.
Yeah.
In your He-Man movie.
Let me just clean up for a second. Let me just throw all this garbage into the sink. Why not the garbage? I don't own a garbage.
And also, like,
you're just like jamming the paper cup down the drain.
It's very strange. And like we're taking a break from the universe being threatened for this. Like who cares?
Yeah. Who gives a fuck? And then doesn't he like throw a dish rag at the people that are bursting in? He's like, ha!
And he's like shutting them, get out of the house or something like that.
Yeah, get out of here.
Yeah, get out of here. Get out of here.
Maybe that's why he thinks that he's shit. No, I'm a piece of shit. The flying disc things are like I'm torn between like, are they cool or are they bad? Because it's like
they're bad.
They're kind
bad.
of fun. Bad. Like I like the idea of it. Like, but at the same time, it looks so goofy. Like,
I will say,
flying on a giant coin.
The only time that He-Man looked like the He-Man action figure was when he was flying around on the discs.
Because they just used an action figure on the disc because they were like cutting it over the shot.
They painted it to look a little bit more realistic.
Yeah, it like I'm not too sure if at that time with that budget if they could do better. Like I want to be as realistic and forgiving as I can be, but it really doesn't suit the movie when it starts happening. And
I'd
and
prefer
he-
like a big cool motorcycle that flies. Like that would be dope. But
Darth
they had some
Skeletor is fucking
they had some
floating.
pieces left over from the alley scene. The some garbage can lids. So they got them to
Yeah.
stand on the garbage can lids and flew around.
Because, like, when did Back to the Future 2 come out? I mean, I know I'm talking about a movie with a significantly different budget.
88, 89?
Yeah, so, like, not...
I think it was 80s.
Or is it the same year?
87? It might be. I'll check.
And what I'm thinking is not so much, like, getting away with Back to the Future 2 level special effects.
89.
Yeah.
89. I'm saying keep it at ground level, and you can get away with Dolph Lundgren swinging his hips around, looking like he's banking corners and whatnot.
Yeah.
You just can't have it like flying like 3 stories in the air, because now you got to have this weird little paper mache cutout
Right.
flying around.
But also,
And-
I don't know if like when he was flying around that little village, I don't know if the trees were moving behind him. I think it might have been a still shot on a still shot. It's like how bad it was.
It like for one, like it looked like on another planet this is happening too, and yeah, it was just it didn't flow, and when it's not flowing, it's taking away from it.
I'm just saying, is there a world where a flying disc that you stand on is cool, or is it always bad? Because I think about like Reboot, and like they had those little flying discs, but there'd be one on each
But it
foot,
looked like a
and I thought
skateboard.
those things they're called zip boards, and I thought they were the coolest shit ever when I was a kid.
But they were able to get away with, like, because this is where I think also another Jack Kirby influence comes into this movie, where it's almost like an attempt at a Silver Surfer kind of thing,
Right. Yeah.
where it's like it's a flying board, but instead of a board, it's a disc. And
I
like
think it's the
would
way that
see-
you stand on it also that's goofy, is that your feet are like 10 and 2 kind of thing. You look like you're like squatting
Yeah.
like you're about to take a shit, and you're just
Yeah.
like, it's goofy. Whereas if you're like the Silver Surfer, you've got one foot in front of the other, your body is sideways and your head is forward.
Yeah,
It's a cooler stance, right?
You've
Visually.
got some like body acting happening where you're throwing your arms in a dramatic way.
Not like you're
and-
about
and-
to do the long jump in the Olympic ski,
Yeah.
downhill skiing or whatever.
Also, if you're the
Yeah.
Silver Surfer, you're having an existential crisis, which adds to it.
Yeah.
Am I
Yeah.
only the power cosmic? Am I not more than the power cosmic?
These foolish humans not realize this gem of a world they live on.
Yeah.
But like, why, and if they're going to have this scene, like, why, and I guess they don't want it to be too violent to adhere to Mattel's standards, but then, like, why don't you have He-Man do something? Like, I think it just ends with him, clashing with another flying surfboard man, and then that's it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Skeletor asks him to bring him to
Oh.
me. But, like, it doesn't really do anything.
I have a small theory that since G.I. Joe would have been on at the same time, that one in that scene, what were they called? Centurions. That
Yeah.
one Centurion that he was chasing looked so much like
Cobra Commander?
look, there's a G.I. Joe that's all black.
Snake Eyes?
Yeah, Snake Eyes. He looked an awful lot like Snake Eyes, and I was wondering if that was another little like insert to be like, we're gonna beat the G.I. Joes.
I don't know.
Like-
I think they just wanted to make them look
Or
scary.
like
so
cool
they made,
ninjas, yeah.
they made them all look like Darth Vader ninjas. Yeah.
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 Those helmets look like they could have been recycled for Shredder's helmet a couple years later.
Well, I think there's actually some of us that looks recycled in the show Captain Power and the Soldiers of the Future.
Definitely
that,
Man at Arms
they-
fucking whole getup.
Yeah.
Power.
Where they just kind of spray painted metallic silver on everything after they were done with this movie. That's fair game, but is this once again, and like you gotta make some kind of use of it. You can't just have it there. It's a movie. It's action. Something happened. Please, something happened.
And then, I mean, like, it's just silly, right? Like, him coming through, like, The stuff that wouldn't be silly is Skeletor and his tank throne thing going through Eternia, like, you know, a colorful forest and the trees are like getting smashed out of the way. But he's going down like Main Street of whatever the hell small town America. And you're just like, this is so silly looking. With
these like interlocked brick crosswalks and
all of his like, flanking his ship. And you're like, this just looks stupid. Like, it's so
very
stupid.
Very strange.
It reminds me of like doing a crossover episode on like a show where the joke is that like the weird characters are in our world and it's just meant to be funny, right? Like, it's like imagine Han Solo met Indiana Jones and you're like, this is so stupid that it's funny. It's not cool. It's just goofy.
But this is very much a trope. They do it at the end of Sonic the Hedgehog 2 has a similar thing to this where they bust out of the crazy cartoon world and now they're back in Earth. And also at the end of the new Mario Brothers movie, a very similar thing happens where the final battle just happens like on an American street.
There's like, I don't know what it is about these storytellers that are like this. It's more interesting if these characters enter into our world, and I'm like, is it more interesting, or is it just because your budget doesn't allow you the amount of money to make the world more interesting? So you just have to have this interesting character come to something that's more tangible for you to film.
Maybe they have the budget, but they're just lazy, and that's like the best they can come up with in their dumb fucking old white man heads.
Well, I mean, that's a lot. Like a lot of writers are like, well, you know, I'm pouring a lot of myself into this, so we have to have it take place in the real world. Things are tangible in the real world, and imagine this character so lost out of their own world, and they'll feel so out of place, like me, because I'm creative.
Yeah.
And you're like,
that's why this takes place at a coffee house in Seattle.
Stop making fish out of water fucking adaptations.
That's why. Yeah, that's why. That's why Timothy Chalamet is talking to Kirby at a coffee shop in Seattle.
In the Kirby movie? Oh, man. Yeah. I think that's the treatment for the fucking Kirby movie. 2027.
I was trying to think of a funnier actor than Timothy Chalamet.
I think Timothy Chalamet is going to play Kirby.
Or maybe Timothy Oliphant?
Yeah, Timothy Oliphant and the other guy who looks like him.
I don't know his name. Josh Duhamel.
Josh Duhamel.
Yeah.
Are finally all in the same movie.
Oh, gosh.
Those three always get confused for one another. Timothy Oliphant, Josh Duhamel, and Kirby.
And Kirby.
I thought you were going to say Timothy Chalamet because you guys are two Tims. I can't tell the two apart.
No, that guy that eats kids. He doesn't eat kids. I'm not going to make that accusation. The guy that had the controversy about being a cannibal was the third guy in that. The guy from
Armie Hammer.
Armie Hammer.
Armie Hammer, the super tall guy.
I don't think that he ate children, did he? I think he wanted to eat women or something.
He just implied that he wanted to
he was. Yeah,
he was in like fantasy chat rooms or something that he was where he would go to like describe eating people. Anyway, let's not talk about this because it's disturbing.
Also, it's all alleged. It's all alleged. Armie Hammer did not eat babies.
Armie Hammer, the true beast man.
The true Kirby. Armie Hammer has to play Kirby and Beast Man.
So I don't know. The only thing that I have left to say is like how awkward that fight is, and how it's almost like they're filming like an interpretive dance fight where they're like, now it's all strobe lights and backlit, like it's like the set vanishes and there's just this black void of
quite literally zero money was left, and it was that age-old bad movie decision of, do we not finish it and cut our losses, or do we finish it with whatever we can and then just sell it, and the money we make back will offset the costs? And it was kind of that.
When you think about it, right? Like movies that do this, where they run out of money, or they're like, we can't top a scene we've already had, or it's going to be boring, or it looks weird. They'll solve the issue by doing something like Big Trouble in Little China, where it's the David Lopan versus Jack Burton.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, it's gonna be a big fight, and it's like, no, Jack Burton just hucks a knife directly into his head.
Yeah.
That's the end.
They come up with something that suits the character if not dramatic enough.
Yeah.
Whereas with this, it was like literally like they say like it wasn't even a skeleton crew to
Skeletor crew.
It was a Skeletor crew. and that's why like it's not even just that it's like an artistic choice with the lighting. It's like they had two lights,
Right.
and they managed to. I think they put the helmet back on Langella, but they didn't do the makeup again for him at that point.
And they had to,
Everything
like-
else was already filmed.
Oh, so they didn't want to light his face too well.
When,
And
when he was
Yeah.
falling off that cliff, they definitely had a bunch of inconsistencies where his like hood was down and his hood was up and his hood was down where he was like falling.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they cut back to him like, if nothing else, a lot of movies from this era, the final fight would maybe go on too long sometimes. But this is like from the school of modern movie making where the hero gets to the villain and just fucking kills him and the movie's over. And I couldn't have I like said
I
out
feel like it
loud-
should have been quicker. He should have just like
Like, even
smashed him so
faster.
hard with the sword that he flew into the pit.
With the-
and just like that was it.
It would have been great if he hit
Yeah.
him with the fucking hilt too.
And
like-
knocks him out,
Yeah.
and then he just throws him
And
in.
just, like body slams him into the pit.
Yeah. I had
Yeah.
a joke I was gonna make, but I can't remember it. Probably wasn't that funny. Oh, it was gonna be something stupid about like they had to get Frank Langella's golden costume back to like the Chinese food restaurant that they rented it from or whatever.
It does look like that.
Like it looks
He
like
does-
something you would see in like an Asian fusion restaurant or something weird.
Because he actually looks. I mean, it's funny you bring up Big Trouble in Little China. He looks like when they're doing the weird finger fight with the
Yeah,
magic, with
where, like, the
peasant
magical-
magic. Yeah,
Or like when the two interpretations are fighting each other, and yeah, it looks like one of those.
yeah. It looks like that, but bad.
But terrible, yeah.
Oh gosh, that's really funny. He does look like he's at the entrance of a Chinese buffet. That's great.
Yeah, I don't really have much else to
No, I
talk
don't-
about
I'm
here. I
pretty
don't know
much-
if you have any more notes, Tim.
Nothing really. Like I'm happy I got to talk about Pig Boy.
I'm surprised we
but-
were able to milk as much as we did out of this conversation because this
Most of
movie is boring.
We started at
It's
8:00, and I remember looking at the time, and it was 8:49, and I was like,
Yeah. How are we gonna do
"I'm
this?
gonna do this for over another hour." I don't think we're gonna be able to get to a third hour on this one, unfortunately. But
No.
No. It would be beating a dead horse for sure.
Imagine we talked about this movie for 4 hours. We're like, we talked about Masters of the Universe more than we talked about Castaway.
yeah,
It's
Ghost in the Shell.
Most certainly, that would be 3 hours and 45 minutes more they spent talking about making this movie.
Yeah.
I mean, we could
themselves.
talk about the cartoon show and stuff, and like that new one was pretty good. I recommend it, but
Mhm.
I think
let's
that-
not do that. Let's not do that.
I think that we just cut our losses and head into some final thoughts. What do you say? What do you say, boyos?
Okie
I agree.
dokie.
What do you say we just go into the final thoughts?
Sounds good.
It's time for our final thoughts.
Voice is strained today.
So was mine, weirdly.
Not sure why.
So I
yeah,
guess
who's going
let's do
first?
it in the same order. Tim, hit us with your final thoughts.
Well, final thoughts in rewatching this. I wasn't surprised with like how bad it still is impressionistically, and I was trying to see it through different lenses of like, can I be forgiving about this or that? And I couldn't quite reach it because I can't escape that 5-year-old me that was just very disappointed and thrown off from the franchise in its entirety. But it says that it does speak a lot that we were at least, I mean, we were motivated by doing the show, but still we were thinking of this could be better. There's people trying to do something here. So I'm at least trying to be considerate of that, and I think there is something there. Is this a movie I could recommend to anybody? Unlike Mark Twain, unlike Castaway, I would say I really can't recommend this to anybody, especially a He-Man fan. That like unless you want to find a way to appreciate old He-Man cartoons and the current stuff more, then watch this to know how bad it can get. But beyond that, I would say it's it's worth watching clips on YouTube, but that's it. You don't need to watch the whole thing because it's like sitting in a wet seat and you just like, I want to get out of this chair so bad. but otherwise, I still had fun rewatching it, but it was mostly to kind of poke holes at it. So, but I still think, you know what? People still worked really hard for this, so I'll give them that much credit.
If you could, do you have any a rating?
Like a rating?
Yeah.
Maybe 2.5 out of 5. 2.5 stars out of 5. If I were to give any kind of Leonard Maltin star rating.
All right. Do you have a joke? Do you have a joke rating that you'd like to give it instead?
I would give it a battle cat without the battle armor out of Battle Cat.
Because when you go to a yard sale, you'd always find the battle cat. But if you want to find that battle armor, fuck you.
Yeah.
And, the stripes are all worn off, and it's like covered in gunk. Yeah.
I saw an interesting thing that even the battle cat from He-Man was like an old toy from like the 1950s that they just had a mold of, and they just kept using it, and it's been used 4 or 5 times before it even got to the He-Man series. Anyway, Steve. Thank you, Tim. Steve.
Yeah. Man, this movie. Ugh. I like He-Man as a franchise, even though, like some of its counterparts, it was created as a horrible ploy to sell crack to children. It worked, I think, on a lot of people. But this movie is painful. As Tim said, there are these little kernels of creativity that you can see throughout the movie, sort of peppered here and there, and you know that there are people that worked on this that did give a shit, but it feels like a lot of people didn't. And you hear things, or I mean, at least they didn't go above and beyond what they should have to make something that would be considered like a cult classic today. But I don't think that this even has that status, right?
No, it's so bad it's bad movie.
Yeah. And but you know, then you hear the stories of Frank Langella saying it's like his favorite performance he's ever been a part of, and you're like, well, I mean, it's not a bad performance, and I guess if he loved doing it, then it makes sense. But it doesn't really make sense to me. I think that this movie could have been like vastly improved, though it would have essentially cut down Frank Langella's role quite a bit if the entire crux of the movie was them trying to bring Skeletor back from some sort of like, you know, void or something. Like, you know, maybe we have sort of the echoes of battle at the beginning of the movie and people are talking about how Skeletor got banished, and then the entirety of the movie is the bad guys going to our world and He-Man has to follow them to stop, rather than the reverse. Because the reverse, it's like heroes on the run, not that great, but heroes hunting down villains that are here to, you know, kidnap somebody. You know, that's more interesting. I think like just that one tweak makes it more interesting, right?
Absolutely.
And then, you know, they need her to be able to summon Skeletor or something, or they have to like use a body to possess Skeletor, and some, you know, maybe Tom Paris's face turns to Skeletor face at the end or something, or the Mr. Strickland or whatever, Detective Strickland. Anyway, that's what could have been better if they just sort of maybe did a couple more passes at the script and didn't have this boring, sterile, carbon copy piece of shit story that you've seen a million times, which is like, oh, we don't have the budget to make a fantasy world, so, you know, we'll spend 5 minutes at the beginning of the movie and 5 minutes at the end of the movie in the fantasy world, but the rest of the movie, 90% of the movie, is going to be them either running through a forest the entire time or in small town USA where nobody lives. And that's, you know, like another, like, I don't even know what went well. I mean, I like those sort of like pieces.
We also cut that segment. You don't have to do what went well.
I know, but I'm trying to give the movie some credit where it's due, because I don't think the movie is like a complete and utter piece of shit, but it's like, you know, almost. I think the performances were all pretty good, considering.
Yeah.
But a lot of them were out of place and weird. It's like the cop doesn't make any sense being the character that he is in the world that this is. But, you know, Courteney Cox is fine. Tom Paris. I'm sorry, I keep calling him Tom Paris. I don't know his actual name.
No, it's something. He's got a name.
Dink Dank Dudley or something.
It's Dink Dank
It's
for
Dink
sure.
Dank- it's
100%.
Dink Dank Dundley.
Robert Duncan
Robert-
McNeill.
Yeah.
Dink Dank Dudley.
Dink Dank, I gotta have your autograph.
Yeah.
Also on Star Trek.
Mhm.
Also
Yes.
on current Star Trek.
That's why I keep calling him Tom Paris, because that's the character's name in Star Trek.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's where I
anyway.
know him from. I was like, that dude looks so fucking familiar, and he's Dr. Tom Paris, Lieutenant Tom Paris. Sorry,
Yes. That's why I've been calling him Tom
I
Paris
get it
for 2
now.
hours.
I don't know a lot about Star Trek, so I didn't put that together, but I do recognize his face from this movie. I was the whole time going, who the fuck is this? Is
Yeah,
this
and
Judge Reinhold?
his love interest was on Friends, just in case you didn't know.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, Miss Arquette.
You know
was
what though?
on.
Like everybody in this movie is a familiar face as well, which is kind of makes it a little bit more bearable because you're at least playing the game of, I know that guy from that thing, that guy's from that thing, that guy's from this thing.
Yeah.
And even the voices as well, right? With Billy Barty and some of those other people. I was going through some of just the voice actors for this, and I'm like, oh man, this guy was in like 100 episodes of 5 different Batman animated series. Like, that's cool. But yeah, I don't know, man. I think this movie is kind of difficult to get through. It's really boring, and I can't really recommend it. I would recommend watching the new He-Man show over watching this movie. You know, it's better. But you know, Dolph Lundgren, if you want to see some sweet pecs, he's got sweet pecs. I don't know.
There's your beefcake.
Yeah, that's your beefcake for beefcake. What was it called, Jason? Beefcake
It's,
timber or something?
Beefcake Timber is a better. Beefcake Timber is
Timber!
Hunky Beefcake Action Month.
Hunky Beefcake Action Month. Okay.
Hunky Beefcake Action Month.
My rating for this movie is excavating it from a dirty beach and then burying it again after.
Oh my god, that's so good. That's gonna be a tough act to follow. Here's what I had to say about the film Masters of the Universe. That's the name of the movie. Overall, it's kind of a bad movie. that may have played better for kids of the 80s. No, not of the 80s, in the 80s. I don't really have the nostalgia connection like many people might, because I was sort of disconnected from He-Man as a kid, but I get it. I understand. I still love Turtles 1 and 2 because they're fucking good movies. Like, Ninja Turtles 1 is like if Batman starred 4 Ninja Turtles.
Well, the action in those movies are far more competent as well.
They're
Right? Interesting.
They're like
It's one of the worst parts about this movie is they're just like, they gave a bunch of idiot swords and said smash them together for a bit.
Dolph
while we film
Lundgren,
you.
like, just like picks a guy up at one point and drops him.
Yeah.
From very high up, he's a tall guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's strange that He-Man isn't really the main character, but is really just a side, just really has a side feud with Skeletor. But Skeletor is absolutely the main villain.
He's Skeletor's side piece.
It all feels a bit disjointed. The movie's pacing is okay. It gets to the next thing fast and doesn't linger. But I do find at parts it just like goes back, and we didn't talk about this, but it just kind of goes back and forth between what the heroes are doing and what the villains are doing, which when it's done well to like tell a story.
You know, like in something good, like I don't know, Star Wars, the movie they were really trying to emulate.
Exactly. Or something even more pulpy, like Pulp Fiction kind of like skips around to what everybody's doing, and it works.
Classic children's film, Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, you know, like classic indie kids movie starring the Gimp.
My favorite toy is the Gimp. Yeah.
I got my Gimp toy, and my get down, you pigs, or whatever she says in the. Sorry, I just lost my.
When you pull the string, he says, "Does he look like a bitch?"
And Royale with cheese.
Yeah. Does Marcel Wallace look like a bitch?
I think where this movie really excels is the special effects. I talked about that quite a bit. Lots of cool practical stuff. Tim, it's funny that you gave this a 2.5 out of 5 because I originally had given this a 2.5 out of 5 as well, but I hard downgraded to a 2. Hard downgraded to a 2 through our conversation.
That doesn't happen often where it goes down.
No, I usually go up. I also give this movie...
Oh. That actually scared me. It was a little loud.
In summation, I think the movie's fine, just not really for me now.
Yeah.
But it sounds like...
I think all of the points that we've all made, there is probably somebody who watched this as a kid and they hold it to some sort of like nostalgic gem in their past, which is fine because I have a ton of those as well. Right?
But like, I know I watched this movie as a kid and fucking it didn't stay with me. And I don't think that's necessary. Like, if this movie fucking ruled, I might have just become a He-Man fan throughout my whole life.
Well, but that's like all those Hulk Hogan movies from the 90s. Like, I watched all those when I was a kid, but I don't give a shit about them because I didn't like them when I was a kid, and I don't like them now, you know?
But I liked Mr. Nanny as a kid, and that movie sucks.
I did not like any of those movies when I was a kid.
I liked Suburban Commando.
I completely forgot about that movie.
You forgot about Mr. Nanny. We got to do.
I remember the cover is him just holding children by the legs or whatever.
Yeah, you do. Suburban Commando, Mr. Nanny, fucking.
Yeah, I remember that. I'm frozen today or whatever. Yeah,
I was frozen today. Well, it's funny you should say that because on the TMNT1 VHS there was an ad for that movie, and I wouldn't end up seeing that movie for many years.
Yes.
At any rate, this isn't a podcast about Hulk Hogan. This is a podcast about He-Man. Nope, it's a podcast about the film. What does it say? The live-action motion picture Masters of the Universe. So I guess we did it.
We've done it again.
Hey, everybody! Tim Covey back again.
Thanks for coming by, Tim. You're always welcome here.
Thank you very, very much. It was still a lot of fun to talk, even about this movie.
You definitely are able to keep the conversation going, which is important for a movie that has not a lot of content to talk about.
I can stretch that dough for you, I guess.
Yeah, and I think
let's talk about chicken ribs again.
So I guess at this point, the last thing we have to do is ask the question we ask every week on the show, and that's, hey, did you see this one?
Good episode, y'all. For some reason had a memory of it being in there, or like the music they played on the saxophone thing was like the theme song for He-Man or something.
How does that song go, Steve?
It goes it's like, I can't remember what, it's been so long, but it's like yeah.
I mean, it does kind of weird.
Yeah,
it does kind of sound like the American Gladiators theme in a weird way.